Hey guys, tonight we begin with a city that never sleeps because the machines won't let it. You step into streets where the air tastes like metal and damp brick, where windows glow faintly through soot, and where every footstep echoes off walls that have heard too much. This isn't the polite Victorian age of portraits and parlors. This is the city underneath the city, the one that coughs, leaks, sweats, and survives. You walk past factories that breathe harder than the people inside them, down alleys where the ground squelches for reasons no one asks about anymore. Every sound matters here. Clogs turning, looms rattling, children running messages too fast for their age. Tonight isn't about history at a distance. It's about standing in it, smelling it, and realizing it doesn't care that you're uncomfortable. So before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable. Let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You arrive at the edge of Manchester and feel the city before you see it. The air reaches you first, thick and damp, tasting like burnt stone and wet iron. It settles on your tongue and does not leave. Smoke hangs low, not drifting so much as lingering, as if it has decided this is where it belongs. You breathe in carefully, instinctively shallow, already learning that every breath here is a small negotiation between your lungs and the sky. The buildings emerge slowly, dark shapes pressed close together, their bricks stained nearly black. They loom rather than rise, crowded and impatient, built as if the city was afraid of running out of space mid-thought. Chimneys dominate the skyline, thin and tall, coughing steadily into the clouds. They work harder than some of the people beneath them. Each one exhales a steady reminder that this place runs on coal, and coal does not care who inhales it afterward. You step forward, and the ground feels soft in a way streets should not. The mud is mixed with ash, trampled flat by thousands of boots that never quite clean themselves. The smell deepens as you move. Layers of smoke, oil, damp wool, and something sour that has been here longer than anyone remembers. It is not unpleasant in a dramatic way. It is worse than that. It is ordinary. The city sounds busy, but not lively. There is no music in the noise, only rhythm. Machinery thrums somewhere unseen, a low, constant pulse that feels less like sound and more like pressure. Carts rattle past, wheels groaning, horses snorting steam into the cold air. Voices overlap without rising. Everyone seems to be talking just loudly enough to be heard, but not enough to invite attention. You get the sense that attention here is expensive. The smoke never fully clears, even when the wind shifts. It slides through streets and alleys, curling into doorways and windows like an unpaid tenant. Laundry hangs stiff between buildings, already tinted gray, surrendering to the atmosphere the moment it leaves the wash. Even the daylight looks tired, filtered through layers of soot until the sun becomes a pale suggestion rather than a source of warmth. You notice how quickly your eyes adjust. At first, everything feels dim and oppressive, but soon you can make out details. Soot outlines window frames like careless eyeliner. Brickwork shows old repairs, patched and repatched, survival in masonry form. You realize the city is not crumbling. It is holding itself together with remarkable stubbornness. Breathing becomes louder in your own ears. Each inhale carries weight. Each exhale feels slightly inadequate, like you have not quite paid what you owe. You understand why coughing is so common here. It is not a sign of illness so much as participation. The air demands acknowledgement. People pass you without comment. Faces are set in neutral lines, eyes forward, bodies angled toward wherever they need to be next. Children weave between adults with practiced ease, small hands already darkened, hair carrying the same faint coal scent as everyone else. No one looks surprised to see you. The city has seen too many strangers to care. You glance up and notice how close the buildings lean toward one another. They create narrow corridors where smoke collects and light struggles. These streets feel designed for efficiency, not comfort. Get people from one place to another. Get goods moved. Get labor where it needs to be. Anything beyond that is a luxury. Somewhere nearby, a factory releases a fresh surge of smoke, thicker than the rest. It rolls out like a sigh, heavy and resigned. You imagine the machines inside, relentless and punctual, never stopping long enough to consider who feeds them. The city breathes through those chimneys, slow and constant, and you are now breathing with it whether you like it or not. You become aware of your clothes, how clean they feel, how out of place that cleanliness suddenly seems. Give it time. The city has a way of correcting small imbalances. Already a fine layer of ash settles on your sleeves, barely visible but persistent. Manchester does not rush you. It simply waits. Standing here, you understand something quietly important. This place is not trying to impress you. It is not hiding its flaws or polishing its image. It exists to function, to produce, to endure. The smoke is not a side effect. It is the signature. You take another breath, deeper this time, and the air pushes back. Welcome, it seems to say, without enthusiasm or hostility, just fact. This is how we live. You step fully into the streets and immediately realize that silence does not live here. It might visit other cities, rest in parks, or slip into bedrooms after dark, but Manchester has evicted it. The sound arrives in layers, overlapping and unashamed. Machines thrum somewhere beyond the walls, a low mechanical heartbeat that never quite fades. Carts clatter over uneven stones, wheels complaining loudly, as if protesting the work they continue to do anyway. Voices rise and fall in constant negotiation, arguing prices, hours, blame, weather, fate. Even the buildings seem to hum, brick and timber vibrating faintly with the memory of effort. The streets are narrow, not because land is scarce, but because speed mattered more than comfort when they were laid down. Houses press close, leaning inward like tired laborers sharing a secret. Sound ricochets between them, bouncing back and forth until it becomes difficult to tell where one noise ends and another begins. A shout from 3 doors down arrives in your ear, already softened by smoke and distance. A hammer striking metal somewhere out of sight rings sharp, then dissolves into the general clatter like a drop of water in a river. You walk and learn quickly that stillness draws attention. Everyone else is in motion, purposeful even when exhausted. Pausing too long in one place feels like blocking a current. People slip around you without comment, shoulders brushing, baskets swinging, boots scuffing. Apologies are rare. They cost time, and time here is already spent before the day begins. A factory bell rings in the distance, loud enough to cut through the noise for a moment. It does not ask, it informs. You feel it vibrate in your chest, a reminder that the city runs on schedules louder than individual voices. Somewhere, a shift ends. Somewhere else, another begins. The sound travels down the streets, echoed by smaller bells, shouted instructions. The sudden surge of footsteps moving in the same direction like iron filings toward a magnet. Children dart past you, shouting half-formed jokes, chased by siblings or errands. Their laughter is brief but bright, cutting through the industrial chorus before being swallowed again. You notice how quickly it fades. Joy here has learned not to linger. It knows better. The walls are close enough that you can hear life happening inside them. A cough behind one window, deep and practiced. The scrape of a chair being dragged across a floor above street level. The clink of a tin cup. Conversations leak through thin brick and thinner privacy, never meant to be overheard, yet impossible to avoid. Everyone knows everyone else's business in fragments, just enough to feel involved, and never enough to help. As you move deeper, the noise does not grow louder so much as denser. It presses in, filling gaps, leaving no space for your thoughts to settle. You stop trying to separate sounds and let them wash over you as a single presence. This is the city speaking, not in sentences, but in effort. Every sound means someone is working, moving, enduring. Even the ground contributes. Your boots splash lightly through shallow puddles that have no obvious source and no intention of leaving. The water carries its own soft slosh, joined by the wet slap of countless other steps. You hear it everywhere, underfoot, under carts, under everything, as if the street itself is breathing. A man argues with a shopkeeper, voices sharp but restrained. The dispute is familiar, almost ritualistic. Too expensive. Not enough weight. Last week it was cheaper. Last week is not today. Neither seems surprised by the outcome. They part without resolution, the argument dissolving back into the street like steam. Somewhere nearby, metal scrapes against stone, a sound that makes you flinch before you can stop yourself. No one else reacts. Whatever caused it has already been accounted for mentally and filed away. Danger here announces itself constantly. You learn to listen without responding. For a moment, you imagine what quiet would feel like. The thought is almost foreign. Silence would be alarming here, like a machine stopping unexpectedly. You realize that the noise is not just tolerated, it is reassurance. As long as the city is loud, it is alive. You keep walking, letting the sound carry you forward, understanding that in Manchester, the noise is not background, it is the story, told over and over, without pause, without mercy, and without silence. You slow your pace and really look at the housing now that you are close enough to touch it. These buildings were not designed so much as assembled, brick stacked on brick with the urgency of someone late for work. Rows stretch ahead of you in uneven lines, each house nearly identical and yet subtly wrong in its own way. Walls bow outward, corners slump, and windows sit at slightly different heights, as if no one bothered to check a level before moving on to the next job. Comfort was not part of the brief. Shelter was sufficient. The bricks themselves tell the story. They are darkened with soot and permanently damp, as though they have been sweating since the day they were laid. Mortar crumbles under your fingers when you brush against it, gritty and soft, like it never fully decided to set. These houses lean inward, not enough to collapse, just enough to feel intimate in an unsettling way. They seem to listen, walls angled toward the sounds of coughing, arguing, breathing, living. Privacy here is theoretical. You imagine how fast this all went up. A city expanding faster than patience, driven by factories that needed bodies more than beauty. Entire neighborhoods raised in a rush, as if pausing to consider comfort might have slowed production. Windows are small and stingy with light. Doors are thin, warped from damp and constant use. Some don't quite close, and some don't open without persuasion. The houses look tired, and you realize they were born that way. You pass a doorway where the brick above the lintel has cracked into a jagged smile. Someone has wedged a scrap of wood into the gap, an improvised solution that has become permanent through repetition. Repairs here are rarely about fixing something properly. They are about keeping it standing long enough to matter tomorrow. Inside these walls, life compresses. You know this without entering. The spacing tells you everything. Rooms stacked like afterthoughts, ceilings low enough to remind you of your posture, staircases that creak loudly, announcing every movement, because secrets don't travel well in structures this thin. Even the chimneys are crowded, flues competing for space, coughing smoke back into rooms when the wind decides to be difficult. Laundry lines stretch between buildings overhead, sagging under the weight of wet clothes that never quite dry. Shirts and trousers sway gently, brushing brick, picking up soot as if magnetized. Cleanliness here is temporary and aspirational. The city always has the final say. You notice how close everything is, not just physically, but socially. Houses share walls, floors, ceilings, and problems. You hear someone laugh behind one wall, sharp and brief, immediately followed by a cough that sounds older than it should. Another wall carries the muffled rhythm of a lullaby, sung more to fill the space than to soothe. The buildings absorb these sounds and hold on to them, creating a low background murmur that never entirely stops. These homes were not built for families so much as for occupancy. Whoever needed space took it, and whoever came later adjusted. It is not uncommon for strangers to share walls, beds, even rooms, because square footage here is measured in necessity, not comfort. You realize that the architecture itself encourages endurance. There is nowhere to retreat, nowhere to stretch out fully, nowhere to forget you are part of something crowded and constant. The bricks are cold to the touch, even through gloves. Moisture clings to them, creeping into bones if you stand still too long. You understand now why people keep moving, why stillness feels like surrender. These buildings do not reward rest. They tolerate it briefly and then remind you of their limitations. You spot small details that reveal quiet resistance. A window box with a struggling plant, leaves gray but stubbornly alive. A doorstep scrubbed clean in defiance of the street. Chalk marks from a child's game fading into the brick, partially erased by rain and time. Tiny declarations that someone tried to make this place theirs, even if only for a moment. Standing there, you grasp the scale of it. This is not one bad house or one unfortunate street. This is an entire city built in a hurry, designed to hold labor rather than lives. The bricks lean inward, listening, yes, but they also close ranks, keeping everything contained. You move on, carrying the sense that these walls have seen too much and will see more, because they were never meant to be temporary, only sufficient. You follow a narrow passage, and then another, stepping down where the street forgets about you. The ground drops away in uneven stone steps worn smooth by feet that never expected better. Each step takes you farther from daylight and closer to the damp breath of the earth itself. By the time you reach the bottom, the air feels heavier, cooler, and faintly offended by your presence. You have entered the cellars, the rooms beneath respectability, where families live below the level of the street and below the notice of most conversations about progress. The walls sweat constantly. Moisture beads and slides down brick that was never meant to be interior, pooling along the floor in shallow puddles that refuse to dry. Water seeps in through cracks, through mortar, through sheer persistence. No one asks where it comes from anymore. It is simply part of the room, like the smell of damp cloth and boiled food, like the quiet knowledge that everything you own will eventually feel wet. Light arrives reluctantly. A single, small window sits near the ceiling, if there is one at all. Its glass clouded with grime and its view limited to passing boots and the occasional drip from above. Daylight filters down as a gray suggestion, enough to confirm that time is passing but not enough to improve morale. At night, a single candle or oil lamp takes over, casting shadows that cling to corners and make the room feel even smaller. Flames flicker nervously here, aware of how close everything stands. You realize quickly that privacy is a luxury no one remembers owning. The room holds everyone at once. Parents, children, sometimes lodgers who arrived out of necessity and stayed out of habit. Beds are shared, turns are taken, and personal space is a rumor passed down from somewhere cleaner. Conversations happen openly, or not at all. Arguments have an audience. Grief does too. The ceiling hangs low enough that taller adults instinctively duck. Beams run overhead, dark with age and moisture, close enough to feel like they are watching. You understand why people stand slightly hunched here. It is not just the ceiling. It is the awareness that the street is directly above you, with all its noise, waste, and indifference pressing down through layers of brick and dirt. The floor is cold and uneven, sometimes bare earth, sometimes rough stone. Furniture is sparse and practical. A table that wobbles, chairs that have outlived their original purpose but refuse to die. A cooking pot blackened by use, resting near a small fire that warms only those closest to it. Everything smells faintly of smoke and damp, an aroma that settles into clothes and skin until you stop noticing it. Children adapt quickly. They play quietly, inventing games that fit the space, careful not to knock over the lamp or trip into the water. They know where not to step, where the floor gives way slightly, where the drip from above lands hardest. Their laughter is softer here, not because they are sad, but because they have learned volume is negotiable. You hear the street through the ceiling. Footsteps, carts, voices. The constant reminder that life continues just inches above your head. Occasionally something spills, and you flinch instinctively as water or worse seeps down, uninvited. No one reacts much. This happens. Someone wipes the floor. Someone sighs. Life resumes. Illness moves easily in these spaces. Damp air clings to lungs. Coughs echo and linger. Fevers spread without needing introductions. You notice how people sit closer together when someone is unwell, not out of carelessness, but because there is nowhere else to go. Separation requires space, and space does not exist here. Still, there are signs of effort. A cloth hung carefully to block a draft. A shelf wiped clean daily, even though the walls drip beside it. A small picture pinned above a bed, edges curling, offering a reminder that the world is larger than this room. These gestures do not change the conditions, but they change the tone. For a moment, you stand still and let the room settle around you. You feel the weight of the street above, the walls beside you, the people sharing your air. This is not hidden poverty. It is engineered. You climb back toward the steps, knowing that for many, this descent is not a visit, but a return, repeated every day, into rooms where survival is practiced quietly and dignity lives wherever it can find space. You step into a room that tries to be everything at once and succeeds only because it has no alternative. It is a bedroom, kitchen, sick room, nursery, dining area, and sometimes a place for strangers to sleep if they can pay a few coins and don't ask questions. The air is warm in a stale way, thick with breath and boiled food, and the faint medicinal bite of something meant to help but rarely does. This single space holds more lives than it should, and it knows it. Parents sit close to the walls, not out of politeness, but strategy. Children cluster near the center, moving carefully around furniture that has memorized every bruise it has ever caused. A lodger occupies a corner, boots tucked beneath a chair, belongings reduced to what fits in a sack. Everyone shares the same light, the same air, the same understanding that nothing here belongs entirely to anyone. Every object pulls double duty. The table is for meals, mending, sorting coins, and laying someone down when they feel faint. Chairs are seats, shelves, and sometimes cribs if you stack coats and hope for the best. The bed is not singular. It is rotated through, claimed in shifts, widened by necessity and narrowed by reality. Someone is always sleeping, waking, or wishing they could. Even the floor works overtime. During the day it catches crumbs, spilled water, and children who move faster than balance allows. At night it becomes a mattress for whoever did not make it into a bed, wrapped in coats, using a rolled sleeve as a pillow. It is never quite clean, but it is never abandoned either. Illness is treated like an uninvited but familiar guest. A cough echoes from one corner, answered by another, until it becomes a sort of grim conversation. Someone lies still under a thin blanket, forehead damp, eyes half open. There is concern, yes, but also routine. When space is limited, sympathy learns to coexist with practicality. The sick are tended to without ceremony, because there is no room for drama. You notice how little noise there is for a space this full. Voices stay low. Movement is careful. Everyone knows exactly where their body can go without colliding with someone else's. Children learn this early. They grow up fluent in avoidance, stepping around adults with practiced grace, learning which boards creak and which corners belong to whom. Food is prepared close to everything else. A pot simmers near the wall, watched constantly because a fire here is not a metaphor, it is a deadline. The smell of cabbage and bread fills the room, heavy but comforting in its way. Meals are simple and shared, portions divided with quiet precision. No one reaches too quickly. No one needs to be told the rules. Clothing hangs wherever it can. Lines stretch across the ceiling. Coats drape over chair backs. Socks rest near the warmth, rotated often to avoid mildew. Clean and dirty blur together. Not from carelessness, but from volume. There is always something drying, something waiting its turn. You realize that conversations here are layered. Someone talks about work while someone else murmurs to a child. A quiet argument unfolds without raised voices, resolved not through victory but exhaustion. Laughter appears unexpectedly, sharp and brief, like a spark. It does not last long, but it leaves warmth behind. Personal moments happen in public. Grief has witnesses. Affection, too. There is no closing a door to be alone with your thoughts, so thoughts learn to share. People here develop an impressive ability to withdraw inward while remaining physically present. You see it in their eyes, the way they look past the room without leaving it. A knock at the door causes a ripple of movement. Everyone shifts, straightens, becomes suddenly aware of appearances. The door opens to admit another person, another story, another set of needs. Space adjusts. It always does. Someone moves aside. Someone offers a stool. Someone calculates where this new body will fit when night comes. Standing there, you feel the strange balance of it all. This room is crowded, uncomfortable, and exhausting, yet it functions with a precision that would impress an engineer. Nothing is wasted. No space is unused. No role is left undefined. You understand that this is not chaos. It is adaptation, and it works until it doesn't. You wake before the sun because the city does not wait for it. Darkness still presses against the window, thick and unconvincing, but the room is already stirring. Someone coughs. Someone shifts. Someone sits up with a practiced sigh that sounds like a tool being set down. Sleep here is not a destination. It is a pause that ends abruptly when the day decides it has had enough of you lying still. The air is cold and damp, clinging to skin the moment you move. You pull on clothes that never quite dry, fabric stiff in places, soft in others, carrying yesterday with them whether you asked or not. There is no mirror worth consulting. You know what you look like. Everyone does. Mourning does not improve appearances. It merely confirms survival. A flame flares briefly as someone lights the lamp. Shadows jump across the walls, then settle back into their usual corners like they were only stretching. Breakfast is assembled with efficiency rather than enthusiasm. Bread, if there is bread. Tea, if there is tea. Something warm if fortune smiled yesterday. Whatever it is, it must be swallowed quickly. Chewing is optional. Time is not. Children wake without protest, which is perhaps the most unsettling thing of all. They dress themselves with hands that move automatically, feet finding shoes without instruction. There is no whining, no bargaining, no pretending to be asleep. They learned early that morning arrives whether you are ready or not. Someone smooths a child's hair with fingers still numb from sleep. Someone else tucks a scrap of food into a pocket for later, just in case later exists. Outside, the city is already awake. You hear it through the walls. The low mechanical murmur that never truly stopped, only softened enough to let you pretend you slept. Somewhere nearby, a factory whistle cuts through the dark, sharp and commanding. It does not suggest, it declares. Another answers in the distance, then another, until the sound ripples across the streets, pulling bodies toward doors like an invisible tide. You step outside and the cold greets you without ceremony. The street is slick, reflecting faint lamplight in dull streaks. Figures move through the gloom, heads down, breath visible, all heading in roughly the same direction. No one greets anyone. There is no time for it, and besides, you will see the same faces again soon enough. Familiarity here does not require acknowledgement. The walk to work begins before the day has officially arrived. You move past shuttered shops and dark windows, past buildings that seem half asleep themselves. Smoke already curls from chimneys, eager and impatient. The smell of coal is strongest in the morning, fresh and assertive, like the city clearing its throat. You pass a woman balancing a tin pail, careful with each step. A man adjusts a cap pulled low over his eyes, squinting against the dark. Children walk in small clusters, quieter now, conserving energy for the hours ahead. Someone hums under their breath, a tune cut short when another whistle sounds. Breakfast settles uneasily. Whatever you manage to eat feels more like an idea than a meal, but it is enough to keep you upright for now. Hunger is a familiar companion, not an emergency. It walks beside you patiently, reminding you of itself without demanding attention. As you near the factory gates, the crowd thickens. The building looms ahead, windows glowing faintly, machines already awake inside. You feel the shift before it happens, the moment when the street hands you over to the rhythm of work. Voices drop, movements sharpen, everyone adjusts their pace instinctively, matching the pull of the entrance. The sky begins to lighten, almost as an afterthought. A thin gray creeps in at the edges, just enough to reveal the city's shape without improving its mood. Dawn here is not celebrated. It is tolerated. The day does not begin with birdsong or sunlight. It begins with obligation. You take one last breath of outside air, heavy as it is, before stepping forward. Morning has done its job. It got you here. You move with the crowd as if the street itself has decided on a direction and everyone is simply obeying. The flow is steady and quiet, a human current drawn toward the same dark mouth of the mill. Boots scrape, soles slap against damp stone, breath fogs briefly and vanishes. No one speaks unless necessary, and even then it is done sparingly, like spending coins you might need later. Children keep pace without complaint. They walk with the seriousness of adults who have misplaced their childhood somewhere between home and the factory gate. Small hands are tucked into sleeves, shoulders hunched against the cold, eyes fixed forward. No one has to tell them where they are going. The route has been memorized by repetition, each turn familiar enough to navigate half asleep. Adults stare ahead, faces set in expressions that are not angry so much as economical. Emotion costs energy, and energy is required elsewhere. You notice how bodies move efficiently, arms close to sides, steps measured, nothing wasted. Even the way people avoid puddles is practiced. A slight shift here, a careful hop there, all done without breaking stride. The city watches you go. Rows of houses line the street, windows dark, doors shut, as if the buildings themselves are still resting while their occupants do the work. Smoke rises in thin columns, already active, already contributing. The smell of coal grows stronger with every step, mixing with damp wool and the faint sour note of yesterday's work clinging to clothes. A cart rattles past, pulled by a horse that looks like it would prefer to be anywhere else. The driver does not apologize for cutting through the crowd. No one expects him to. You step aside automatically, then fall back into line, the rhythm unbroken. The street absorbs interruptions and moves on. You pass a corner where two streets meet, and the crowd thickens as more people join, folding in seamlessly. There is no greeting, no acknowledgement beyond a shared understanding of direction. This is not unfriendly. It is efficient. Familiar faces appear and disappear at your side, known well enough to trust but not well enough to slow down for. The mill comes into view gradually, its bulk emerging through the haze like a permanent storm cloud that forgot how to leave. Windows glow faintly despite the lingering dark, squares of dull light hinting at motion inside. You can feel it before you reach it, a subtle vibration underfoot, the low, constant thrum of machinery that never fully sleeps. It pulls at you, not physically, but mentally, the way a schedule pulls at a clock. Children glance up at the building briefly, then look away. They have learned not to stare. Adults do not look at it at all. Their focus narrows to the gate, the entrance, the place where the street ends and the shift begins. Someone adjusts a scarf. Someone else tugs gloves into place. Final preparations, quiet and personal. Conversation would feel strange here, almost rude. Words would bounce uselessly between bodies already committed to silence. When someone does speak, it is brief and practical, a reminder, a warning about a slick patch near the entrance, a murmured comment about a whistle heard too early or too late. Then quiet returns, settling comfortably over the group. As you draw closer, the crowd compresses slightly, Personal space shrinks without complaint. This is temporary. Everyone knows that. Inside, it will be worse. But complaining now would change nothing. The gate looms ahead, iron bars dark with age and use, wide enough to admit labor and little else. A factory bell rings, sharp and final. It slices through the air and lands somewhere deep in your chest. The sound does not hurry you. It confirms what you already knew. Steps quicken just enough to acknowledge authority without appearing desperate. No one runs. Running would suggest weakness or lateness, and neither is acceptable. You glance sideways and see a child straighten instinctively at the sound, shoulders squaring, face blank. The transformation is subtle but complete. Whatever they were before this moment is set aside. The mill requires a certain posture. The gate swallows the first rows of people, bodies disappearing into shadow. The noise grows louder as you approach, no longer distant but immediate, pressing against your ears. The smell shifts too. Oil and hot metal replacing street dampness. The outside world recedes quickly, like a thought you no longer have time to finish. You cross the threshold with everyone else, carried forward by habit and necessity, understanding that the walk is over, and the day, properly speaking, has begun. You step inside and the noise closes around you like a door that locks from the outside. The factory floor does not greet you. It overwhelms you. Sound hits first, a dense wall of clatter, whirring, grinding, and pounding that leaves no room for smaller thoughts. It is not loud in waves. It is loud in totality. Every machine speaks at once, and together they erase the idea that silence ever existed. The air vibrates constantly. Not enough to knock you over, just enough to keep you alert whether you want to be or not. Your chest hums faintly in response, as if your body is trying to match the frequency of the place. Conversation is impossible here without shouting, and shouting feels pointless. Words get shredded before they travel more than a few feet. You quickly learn that communication relies on gestures, nods, and expressions sharpened by repetition. The machines dominate everything. Rows of them stretch across the floor, belts spinning, arms jerking, wheels turning with unwavering confidence. They do not rush. They do not slow. They simply continue, patient and indifferent, as though they expect you to fail before they ever do. Oil coats their surfaces, catching the dim light and throwing it back in dull reflections. Heat radiates outward, mingling with the smell of metal, grease, and cotton dust until it becomes its own atmosphere. You notice how human bodies arrange themselves around this mechanical landscape. People stand where the machines allow them to stand, move when the machines permit movement, rest only when the rhythm briefly loosens its grip. Arms reach, hands tie, fingers dart in and out of danger zones with practiced precision. The body adapts quickly when it must. Shoulders hunch just enough to avoid beams. Feet plant wide for balance on vibrating floors. Ears learn to filter out pain. Children work here too, and you see immediately why. Their small size fits the gaps the machines leave behind. They slip beneath frames, reach into narrow spaces, move fast enough to avoid disaster most of the time. Their faces are serious, eyes alert, attention stretched tight. There is no room for wandering thoughts. Inside the noise, thinking is a liability. The floor is alive with motion. Threads drift through the air like pale ghosts, settling on hair, skin, eyelashes. You brush them away without realizing you are doing it. Everyone does. The dust gets everywhere, clinging to sweat, sneaking into lungs, making its presence known hours later when coughing begins. For now, it is just part of the texture of the day. Time behaves strangely here. Without silence, without conversation, without windows offering a clear view of the sky, hours blur together. The only markers are bells and whistles that cut through the noise briefly before being swallowed again. When one sounds, people shift positions automatically, like parts responding to a signal. You realize you have been standing longer than you thought. Or shorter. It is difficult to tell. The heat builds steadily. Bodies glisten. Sleeves are rolled. Collars loosened where possible. Sweat drips unnoticed. Stopping to wipe your face would mean losing pace, and pace matters. The machines expect a certain speed, and falling behind draws attention you would rather avoid. Supervisors move along the edges, watching for disruptions in flow, eyes trained on output rather than faces. Accidents happen quietly at first. A sharp intake of breath, a sudden stillness. Then movement resumes around the gap left behind. Someone is guided away. Someone else steps in. The machine does not pause long enough to acknowledge the exchange. You understand quickly that survival here depends on blending into the rhythm, not resisting it. Despite everything, there is a strange order to the chaos. Each person knows their place, their motion, their responsibility. The noise, overwhelming as it is, becomes a kind of map. You recognize changes in pitch, shifts in tempo, warning signs embedded in the roar. Your body listens even when your mind cannot. There is humor here too, dark and fleeting. A raised eyebrow when a machine coughs like an old man. A smirk exchanged when a supervisor misjudges a belt and jumps back just in time. These moments pass quickly, swallowed by sound, but they matter. They remind you that the machines have not entirely won. You work because stopping would be louder than continuing. You move because stillness would draw the wrong kind of attention. Inside the noise, you do not think about the day ending or the world outside these walls. You think about hands, timing, distance, and the noise thinks for you. You notice the children once you stop trying not to. At first, they blend into the machinery, small shapes moving where the machines leave gaps, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, or simply cut short enough not to matter. Then you see how often adults step aside to let them through, how hands gesture them forward into spaces no grown body fits anymore. Their size is not a vulnerability here. It is a qualification. They move fast because they have to. Speed matters more than safety, and safety has never been clearly defined anyway. A small hand darts between spinning parts to clear a snag before it becomes a problem. A narrow shoulder slips under a frame to retrieve something dropped. A child crawls where an adult would hesitate, knees and palms already hardened by repetition. The machines do not slow for them. The machines never slow. You watch a boy, no older than 10, judge distance and timing with the seriousness of someone twice his age. His face is calm, focused, utterly unchildlike. He does not look at the machine as something dangerous. He looks at it as something to be managed, like weather or hunger. When he pulls his hand back just in time, there is no celebration, no visible relief. That is simply how it is done. Growing up here is postponed indefinitely, not because childhood lasts longer, but because adulthood arrives too early and never quite settles. These children learn responsibility before they learn how to play properly. Their games are folded into work. Who can move fastest without drawing attention? Who can clear more tangles before the supervisor looks over? Who can keep going the longest without stopping to cough? They communicate with glances and quick gestures, a shared language shaped by noise and urgency. Words would slow them down. You see one child tap another's elbow sharply, a warning passed faster than speech. A nod answers. The problem is handled. The belt keeps moving. Their hands tell the story better than their faces. Fingers are nicked and scarred, nails darkened, skin toughened in places it should not be. These hands are too small for the work they do, which is exactly why they are here. They reach where adults cannot, and are blamed when something goes wrong, because small hands are also easy to replace. Supervisors notice productivity, not age. A child who works quickly is praised in the only currency that matters here, continued employment. A child who hesitates is corrected sharply, not out of cruelty but efficiency. There is no time for lessons that do not produce immediate results. Fear is considered a delay. You see moments that almost resemble kindness. An older worker positions himself slightly closer to a dangerous machine when a child is assigned nearby, not to protect them directly, but to shorten the distance help would need to travel. A girl is handed a rag to wrap around a sore wrist, the gesture quick and wordless. These acts are subtle, easily missed, but they happen. They are the closest thing to care the floor allows. The noise does not discriminate. It presses into small ears just as forcefully as large ones. Children learn to read lips, to sense changes in vibration, to feel when something is about to go wrong through their feet. Their awareness is sharp and constant. Daydreaming is a liability they cannot afford. You catch a flash of something else now and then. A grin exchanged when a task is completed smoothly. A brief mock bow when someone narrowly avoids trouble. Humor survives here, stripped down and practical. Like everything else, it does not distract. It sustains. There is a moment when a machine jerks unexpectedly and a child freezes, eyes wide for just a fraction of a second. The belt passes. The danger moves on. Work resumes. That pause is so brief you almost miss it. It is enough. You realize that for these children, the factory floor is not a temporary hardship on the way to something better. It is the landscape of their development. They grow into the rhythm, their bodies shaped by it, their instincts tuned to its demands. Education happens in motion. Maturity is measured in endurance. When the bell eventually rings and the shift loosens its grip, they do not cheer. They simply move on to the next requirement of the day, carrying their small hands with them, already preparing to use them again tomorrow. Time stops behaving like something you can count once the bells take over. Inside the mill, hours are not measured by clocks or light or hunger, but by sharp interruptions that slice through the noise and tell you what you are allowed to do next. A whistle screams, and the floor shifts almost instantly. Bodies adjust without discussion. Hands pause, then resume. Another bell rings later, or earlier. It is hard to tell. And suddenly you are permitted to breathe differently. Rest exists here, technically. It arrives on schedule, announced loudly, enforced strictly, and rationed carefully. When the signal comes, you do not feel relief so much as permission to notice how tired you already are. Muscles ache the moment they are allowed to. Backs straighten with effort. Hands flex slowly, testing themselves like tools taken briefly off the line. You sit where you can, stand where you must, and eat whatever you brought without savoring it because the next bell is already approaching. Exhaustion is assumed. It is built into the system like oil in the gears. No one asks if you are tired. The question would make no sense. You are tired because the work requires it. The machines expect it. The schedule depends on it. Anything less would suggest inefficiency. The bells do not negotiate. They arrive when they arrive, indifferent to your internal sense of time. You may feel like only minutes have passed, or like you have lived several small lifetimes since the last signal, but the bell does not care. It rings anyway, and that sound overrides everything else, even the machines, if only for a heartbeat. In that instant, you feel the power it holds. Then the noise swallows it again, and the day continues. Mistakes are punished not by shouting so much as by momentum. If you fall behind, the line does not wait. If you misjudge timing, the machine does not forgive. Consequences arrive immediately, physical and obvious. A snapped thread means more work. A missed step means pain. A moment of distraction becomes something you carry for the rest of the shift, sometimes longer. You learn quickly to anticipate the bells, to feel when one is coming by the way. Supervisors glance toward the clock. By the subtle tightening of movement around you, people begin to rush slightly before the sound. Trying to finish a task before permission to stop or start changes the rules. This anticipation becomes its own kind of stress, a low hum beneath everything else. When rest ends, it ends cleanly. The bell rings and bodies rise almost in unison, not dramatically, not eagerly, just efficiently. Food is packed away. Tools are reclaimed. Conversations that never fully began end immediately. The transition back into work is smoother than the transition out. It always is. You notice how children respond to the bells with the same precision as adults. They do not lag or protest. They have learned that timing is safety. Being in the wrong place when the bell rings can be dangerous. The schedule does not adjust for smaller bodies. It barely adjusts for anything. As the hours stack up, the bells begin to feel closer together or farther apart. The distinction blurs. Your sense of time stretches and compresses unpredictably. You catch yourself counting tasks instead of minutes, cycles instead of hours. Time becomes mechanical, segmented, repeatable, stripped of narrative. There is a strange comfort in this, unsettling as it sounds. When everything is decided for you, there is less room for uncertainty. You know when you can stop. You know when you must continue. The bells remove choice, and with it, a certain kind of anxiety. You endure because endurance is scheduled. Still, the body keeps its own quiet tally. Muscles stiffen, eyes burn, ears ring long after the bells fade. Small mistakes multiply as fatigue deepens, and you work harder to prevent them, concentrating fiercely, knowing that the machines do not care why you slip. Eventually, a final bell cuts through the noise with a slightly different tone. The day loosens its grip. The machines wind down just enough to acknowledge the signal. The shift releases you not with kindness, but with completion. You do not feel finished. You feel paused. You do not notice the cotton at first because it arrives gently, floating through the air like something harmless. Thin white threads drift around the machines, catching the light when the lamps hit them just right. They settle on hair, eyebrows, the backs of hands. They look almost delicate, like snow that forgot how to be cold. Only later do you realize they are everywhere because they are inside you too. With every breath, the dust comes along. It slides past your nose and mouth, carried deep into places you cannot reach back into. You inhale it without thinking, because thinking slows you down, and slowing down draws attention. The air tastes faintly sweet at first, then dry, then flat. After a while, you stop tasting it at all. Your lungs accept the intrusion with quiet resignation. Coughing surrounds you constantly. It comes in different rhythms and tones, some sharp and sudden, others deep and rattling, like something loose trying to escape. No one looks up when it happens. A cough here is not an alarm. It is punctuation. The machines roar on, indifferent, their steady clatter swallowing the sound almost as soon as it appears. You cough too, eventually. At first you try to do it quietly, turning your head, covering your mouth with your sleeve. It feels polite, unnecessary but polite. Later, you stop bothering. The noise does not matter. Everyone else is doing it, and no one is keeping count. The factory has taught you that discomfort is not noteworthy unless it stops production. The dust clings to sweat and skin, working its way into every crease. When you wipe your face, your hand comes away grayish white, like you have aged suddenly. It settles into clothes and refuses to leave, even when washed. You will carry it home with you, into beds and meals and conversations. A small part of the mill that insists on joining your life outside these walls. You notice how the children breathe differently, shorter breaths, quicker, as if their bodies instinctively know to limit exposure. It does not help much. Their coughs are lighter for now, almost playful in comparison, but they are learning the sound. It will deepen with time. Everything does. Supervisors speak about dust the way they speak about weather. It is unfortunate, unavoidable, and no one's fault. Windows are cracked open when possible, though the outside air is hardly an improvement. Fans move the dust around more than they remove it. You learn not to stand directly beneath the drifting clouds when bales are handled, but avoidance only goes so far. The air belongs to the cotton now. Your chest tightens as the hours pass. Breathing becomes a conscious act for a while, then fades back into habit. You feel the urge to cough rise and fall, suppressed until it cannot be ignored. When it finally breaks free, it comes with a sharp sting, followed by a brief sense of relief that does not last. You think about how strange it is that something so soft can be so persistent. Cotton dresses the world, fills homes, lines pockets. Here, it coats lungs and throats, invisible once it settles in. The contradiction feels almost intentional. like a joke the factory tells without smiling. At rest breaks, you swallow tea or water, hoping to wash the dust down. It helps for a moment, then the air reasserts itself. Conversations, when they happen, are punctuated by coughs that interrupt sentences without apology. No one waits for them to pass. Words continue around them, practiced and efficient. By the end of the shift, your throat burns faintly, a reminder that the day has left its mark. You clear it once more before heading toward the exit, joining the chorus one last time. Outside, the air feels heavier but different, the smoke familiar, the cotton less visible. You breathe deeply out of habit and then stop yourself, unsure which air is kinder. The coughing follows you out anyway. It always does. You learn quickly that accidents here do not arrive with drama. They happen mid-motion, folded into the rhythm of the floor, brief disruptions rather than defining events. A hand slips, a sleeve catches, a foot misjudges a patch of oil. The machine reacts the only way it knows how, by continuing. Sound does not change. The belts do not pause out of respect. At first you freeze when it happens. Someone yelps, sharp and involuntary, and for half a second your body wants to stop, to look, to understand. Then you notice that everyone else has already adjusted. A supervisor appears from nowhere, gestures sharply. Two workers guide the injured person away with practiced efficiency. One arm under the shoulder, another hand already pressing cloth against skin. Blood darkens fabric quickly, bright against the gray and white of the floor, startling only if you let yourself notice it. You do not let yourself notice it for long. The line slows just enough to accommodate the gap, then closes it. Another person steps forward. Sometimes it is the next worker in sequence. Sometimes it is someone smaller, quicker, easier to fit into the space without rearranging too much. The machine resumes full pace as if nothing has happened, because to the machine, nothing has. Blood is wiped away with rags that have done this before. The floor is scrubbed just enough to remove the slip hazard. No one wants a second interruption. The smell lingers faintly beneath oil and cotton, metallic and sharp, then fades as the day moves on. You are surprised by how quickly your stomach settles. The body adapts faster than the mind would like to admit. You notice that injuries are categorized silently. Some are minor, the kind that earn a tight wrap and a return to work before the bell. Others are serious enough to warrant absence, which is treated as a logistical problem rather than a moral one. Who covers the position? How quickly? Whether production will suffer? These questions matter more than how the injury occurred. Children are not spared from this calculus. When one gets hurt, the reaction is the same: efficient, contained. A child is led away, eyes wide, more shocked by the sudden attention than the pain. Another child steps in without comment, hands already moving. Growing up here means learning that attention is temporary and work is constant. There is no crowding around the injured, no gasps, no drawn-out concern. Sympathy exists, but it expresses itself differently. A nod later, a quiet check at the end of the shift. Someone setting aside a portion of food for a family that will miss a day's wages. These are small gestures, easily overlooked, but they are how care survives in a place that does not reward it openly. You begin to understand that reacting too strongly is considered inefficient. Panic wastes time. Horror distracts. The proper response is adjustment. The floor teaches this lesson repeatedly until it sticks. When another accident happens, and it will, you feel the moment pass through you with less resistance. You continue working, hands steady, eyes focused, even as you register what is happening nearby. This unsettles you more than the accident itself. Supervisors keep records, though you rarely see them written. Names are remembered, patterns noted. A worker who injures themselves too often becomes a problem, not because they are careless, but because they interrupt the flow. The unspoken rule is simple: you are valuable as long as you can keep up. There is a dark humor that surfaces around injuries, quick and sharp, shared only when the machines are loud enough to cover it. Someone jokes about keeping all their fingers today. Someone else responds by wiggling theirs dramatically, before getting back to work. These moments are not cruel. They are pressure valves, letting out just enough fear to keep going. The strangest part is how quickly the floor returns to normal. The gap left by the injured disappears. The rhythm reasserts itself. If you were not paying attention, you might miss that anything happened at all. Only a faint smear near a drain hints at the interruption, and even that is temporary. You realize that tragedy requires pause, and pause is the one thing this place does not allow. When the bell eventually rings, releasing you for a brief rest or the end of the shift, you notice the absence more clearly. A familiar face missing from its usual position, a task reassigned. The floor has already absorbed the loss and moved on, and tomorrow it will be ready to do it again. You sit at the table with the coins spread out before you, small, dull circles catching the light like they are trying to look more important than they are. This is the part of the day that feels almost quiet, not because it is peaceful, but because the noise has moved inside your head. The arithmetic begins whether you invite it or not. You count carefully, not because the sum will change, but because hope is stubborn. Fingers slide coins into little piles, rent in one, food in another, coal in a third that already looks dangerously thin. You know the order by heart. Rent first, always. A roof, even a bad one, outranks everything else. Miss that, and the rest of the calculation collapses into something much worse. Food comes next, though it argues constantly with coal. You can eat less, stretch meals thinner, pretend hunger is a personality trait. Cold is harder to negotiate with. Coal keeps the damp from settling too deep into bones, keeps water from freezing in buckets, keeps illness from finding an easier way in. You stare at the piles and rearrange them, shaving a coin from one to bolster another, pretending this is strategy and not surrender. There is a strange intimacy to this ritual. You know every coin's weight, every nick and worn edge. Some have passed through so many hands they feel almost soft. You wonder briefly where they have been, what else they failed to cover, then push the thought away. Curiosity does not add value. If there is anything left after rent, food, and coal, it becomes contingency, shoes that need replacing, a doctor you hope not to need, a funeral you suspect might arrive uninvited. This pile is usually imaginary, but you still look for it, just in case. The numbers never quite agree with reality. Wages arrive with confidence, stamped and official, as if daring you to argue. Expenses respond with quiet certainty. The gap between them is where improvisation lives. Borrowing, owing, skipping, choosing which discomfort is tolerable this week. You do the math again, slower this time, like repetition might soften the result. It does not. The coins remain unmoved, unimpressed by your effort. Somewhere in the room, someone clears their throat, waiting for an answer you already know. You tell them what you can spare, not what you have, because the difference matters. Children watch this process without being told to. They learn numbers early here, not from books but from necessity. They understand subtraction before addition. They know that every purchase removes something else from the table. When they ask for small things, they do it carefully, as if testing the strength of the structure holding the household up. There is humor in this, though it arrives sideways. Someone jokes about being rich for a full minute after payday. Someone else laughs about how coal seems to burn faster when you look at it. These jokes land because they have to. Without them, the math would feel too heavy, too personal, too sharp. You fold the remaining coins into a cloth and tuck them away like they might escape if not watched closely. This is not savings. This is survival with a pause button. You know that one unexpected expense can erase it instantly. The city is good at providing those. As you lie down later, the numbers replay themselves behind your eyes. You mentally adjust future weeks, imagining slight improvements, tiny raises, impossible windfalls. These thoughts are not plans so much as breathing exercises. They keep panic from settling in fully. The arithmetic never ends. It follows you to work, to bed, into conversations that circle around money without naming it. Everyone speaks the language fluently. Everyone pretends they are only temporarily bad at it. You sleep knowing that tomorrow, the coins will look the same. They always do. You step out of the mill with your shoulders locked high and your ears still vibrating, as if the machines followed you halfway to the door and only turned back at the last second. The noise does not stop immediately. It lingers inside your head, a phantom rhythm that keeps time even when the belts are out of sight. You blink against the dimming light and breathe in air that is technically fresher, though the difference feels philosophical. The street receives you without ceremony. Night does not calm Manchester, it adjusts it. The smoke hangs lower now, pressed down by cooler air, and the lamps glow through it like tired eyes refusing to close. The crowds thin, but never disappear. People peel away in small streams, each heading toward their own version of home, moving carefully, conserving what little energy the day left them. Your body announces itself with every step. Muscles tighten, then complain when asked to loosen. Hands ache with a dull persistence, fingers reluctant to uncurl fully. You roll your shoulders, wince slightly, then stop doing that because it does not help. Pain here is not dramatic. It is companionable, walking beside you, reminding you that the day has been accounted for. Children spill out ahead of you, suddenly louder now that the worst is over. They kick stones, argue about nothing, laugh too hard at jokes that barely exist. Their energy feels borrowed, like it will need to be repaid with interest later. Adults walk more quietly, eyes forward, minds already shifting toward the next set of calculations waiting at home. You pass shops with windows glowing, warm and unreachable. Inside, people with cleaner coats move slowly, choosing, lingering. You glance in, without resentment, just curiosity, as if observing a different species that breathes different air. The glass reflects your own outline back at you, smudged and tired, and you move on. The streets twist narrower as you go, the buildings leaning closer together, shutting out what little sky remains. The sounds change here. Fewer carts, more voices. Someone argues from an open doorway. Someone sings badly and proudly. Somewhere deeper in the maze, laughter spills out of a gin palace, sharp and reckless, the kind that promises warmth and steals tomorrow. You keep walking. The temptation passes like everything else, acknowledged and set aside. There is a rhythm to this walk, a mental unwinding that mirrors the physical one. With each step, the mill loosens its grip slightly, not enough to forget, but enough to breathe without counting. The smell of sewage creeps in as you near home, familiar and unwelcome. It mixes with cooking smoke and damp brick, a scent that belongs exclusively to this hour. You step around puddles that reflect the lamps in broken pieces, careful where you place your feet. A misstep now would feel personal. Neighbors appear in doorways, silhouettes framed by weak light. Nods are exchanged, brief and efficient. No one asks about your day. They already know. The question would be redundant. By the time you reach your building, your ears have mostly stopped ringing, replaced by a quieter ache. The city hums on around you, never fully sleeping, never fully awake. Somewhere nearby, a factory whistle sounds for another shift, another group beginning their own long day, while yours winds down. You pause at the door for just a moment, hand resting against the worn wood. This threshold marks a small but important transition. Inside waits a different set of pressures, softer but no less real. Outside, the street continues, without you. You step in and close the door behind you, carrying the city with you anyway. You pass the gin palaces like they are beacons designed specifically to test your will. Their windows glow warmer than anything else on the street, amber light spilling out onto wet cobblestones, promising heat, laughter, and the temporary forgetting of facts. Inside, you can see bodies pressed close, faces flushed, hands wrapped around small glasses that catch the light like treasure. The door opens and closes constantly, releasing bursts of sound and smell. Laughter tumbles out first, loud and unfiltered, followed by the sharp sweetness of alcohol and sweat. Someone staggers into the street, smiling at nothing in particular, then disappears into the dark again, pulled back inside by friends or gravity. The place looks alive in a way the factories never do, animated by choice rather than obligation. You slow your pace without meaning to. It happens automatically, like your body knows where warmth lives and wants to confirm it still exists. The cold seeps through your boots and reminds you that coal is rationed, not generous. Your shoulders ache, your hands still hum faintly, and the idea of sitting somewhere bright and loud feels almost medicinal. Inside, the relief is immediate. You know this without stepping through the door because you have done it before. The first drink loosens something tight behind your eyes. The second convinces you that tomorrow is a problem for a different version of yourself. The third rearranges priorities entirely. For a brief, shimmering stretch of time, the mill fades into something distant and manageable, like a story you once heard about someone else. The Gin Palace does not pretend to be a solution. It offers escape, not repair. The floors are sticky, the air thick, the jokes repetitive. But no one asks you to plan or calculate or endure. Here, you are allowed to react, to laugh too loud, to complain without fixing anything, to feel like the day ended somewhere other than exhaustion. You watch faces through the glass, men and women who look lighter than they did outside, unburdened for the price of a few coins. Someone sings badly and is applauded for it. Someone else leans against the bar, eyes half closed, absorbing the noise like heat from a fire. It looks easy. It always does. You also know what waits outside. The walk home does not shorten because of gin. The room does not grow larger or warmer. The coins you counted earlier do not multiply in your pocket. Tomorrow's bell does not ring later out of sympathy. The relief expires quickly, and the cost lingers longer than advertised. There is humor in this too, dark and familiar. Someone once said the gin helps you forget how poor you are until you wake up even poorer. The joke lands because it is accurate. Laughter inside those walls is real, but it borrows against the future. Interest is collected promptly. You stand there longer than necessary, letting the light wash over you without stepping into it. This is a kind of compromise, tasting the promise without swallowing it. The street around you continues its own business. Someone bumps past, heading in with determination. Someone else stumbles out, already negotiating with the consequences. The Gin Palace does not judge. It waits. It will be there tomorrow, glowing patiently, offering the same deal. It survives because the city keeps producing reasons to need it. You move on, the warmth fading behind you, replaced by the cooler, steadier dark. The decision settles into your body with a mix of relief and disappointment, both familiar. You tell yourself it is better this way tonight. You tell yourself many things. Some of them are even true. As you walk, the laughter muffles, then disappears entirely. The street narrows, the light dims, and the city resumes its quieter tone. The Gin Palace becomes just another window behind you, another option deferred. You keep going, carrying your exhaustion with you, sober and intact, knowing that escape is always nearby, glowing softly, waiting for a night when you decide the cost is worth it. You come to understand that drink here is not a vice so much as a tool. It sits alongside bread and coal in the mental inventory, not celebrated, not defended, simply accounted for. People speak of it the way they speak of liniment or warm water, something that takes the edge off what cannot be fixed. When bodies hurt and thoughts linger too long, a glass offers a kind of temporary edit. You watch it administered carefully at first. A small pour after a long shift. A measured swallow before bed. Someone explains that it helps with sleep, with aches, with the way the day replays itself uninvited once the lights are low. No one claims it cures anything. That would be dishonest. They say it quiets things. That is closer to the truth. Hunger softens under its influence, becoming less demanding, more abstract. Pain retreats to a distance where it can be ignored for a while. Memory blurs at the edges, not erased, just smudged enough to make room for rest. The relief is real and immediate. which is why it spreads so easily from hand to hand, from night to night. You notice how often it appears in places where other comforts do not. A bottle passed quietly in a cellar room, a shared glass after a child finally falls asleep, a swallow taken standing up because there is nowhere to sit. It is efficient. It does not require space or preparation. It fits into gaps. There is humor in how openly people acknowledge its limits. Someone jokes that the drink is the only doctor who never asks questions. Another says it cures everything except tomorrow morning. Laughter follows, brief and knowing. These jokes are not advertisements. They are disclaimers. You see the other side too. The way one glass becomes two, then a habit disguised as routine. The way voices grow louder, then sloppier. The way relief turns into dependence without announcing the change. No one plans this. It happens the way damp spreads through walls. Quietly, persistently. Children learn the rules early. They fetch bottles without comment. They know which adults drink to soften pain and which drink to disappear. The difference is subtle but important. One kind returns, the other lingers. There is no moral lecture attached to any of this. Judgment requires energy, and energy is scarce. People notice patterns, not sins. If someone drinks too much, the concern is practical. Will they make it to work? Will they spend the rent? Will they fall and hurt themselves where no one can see? These are the calculations that matter. You try it yourself, eventually. Not out of desperation, but out of curiosity. The first warmth spreads quickly, loosening muscles you forgot were clenched. The second drink smooths the noise in your head, turning sharp thoughts into dull shapes that drift past without snagging. For a moment, the city feels farther away, less personal. You understand immediately why this works. It does not ask you to hope. It does not demand improvement. It offers a small, reliable pause in a place where so little is negotiable. That matters. But the pause ends. It always does. The glass empties. The warmth fades. Sleep arrives unevenly, sometimes thick and heavy, sometimes elusive and shallow. Morning comes regardless, bringing with it the same aches, the same arithmetic, the same walk through streets that never quite rest. People know this. That is what makes the choice interesting. They drink anyway, eyes open, expectations managed. It is not optimism, it is triage. You notice how drink gathers people together, briefly. Stories are shared that would otherwise remain buried. Complaints are voiced without solutions attached. Laughter fills the room in a way that feels almost luxurious. Then the bottle empties, and the room settles back into its usual shape. No one pretends this is enough. They pretend it is necessary. As the night wears on, you watch the balance carefully, learning where the line lives. Some nights it holds, some nights it does not. The city absorbs both outcomes with the same indifference it shows everything else. You lie down later with the faint taste still lingering, the edges of the day softened but intact. The drink did what it promised, and nothing more. Tomorrow will ask for payment in full. You turn into the alleys because that is where the street decides to empty itself. These narrow passages are not planned so much as tolerated, leftover spaces where buildings stopped paying attention. The air changes immediately. It grows heavier, wetter, layered with smells that do not bother pretending to separate themselves. Rot, damp wood, old food, human waste, and something chemical you cannot quite name, all share the same space, blended into a scent the city seems proud of producing. Underfoot, the ground is never just ground. It shifts slightly when you step, soft in places, slick in others. Water pools without committing to being liquid or solid, a grayish surface broken by floating scraps that once had purpose. You learn to walk carefully, placing your feet where others have already survived, trusting the collective knowledge of those who came before you. These alleys collect everything the rest of the city discards. Broken furniture leans against walls like exhausted animals. Rags hang from nails, abandoned mid-decision. Ash settles into corners where rain cannot reach it. The refuse does not pile neatly. It spreads, merging with itself until individual origins become irrelevant. You notice how children navigate these spaces with ease. They hop from stone to stone, balance along raised edges, avoid the worst patches without looking down. They have memorized the terrain the way others memorize playgrounds. Adults move more cautiously, weight distributed carefully, eyes scanning ahead for trouble disguised as puddles. Rats move openly here. They do not scurry so much as stroll, confident in their ownership. One pauses to look at you, whiskers twitching, then continues on its way. You are a visitor. It lives here. That fact feels indisputable. The walls sweat. Moisture seeps from brick and mortar, carrying with it faint stains that suggest long familiarity with whatever passes through. You brush too close and pull your coat back instinctively. Then remember, it will not matter. Everything here leaves a mark, eventually. Sounds behave differently in the alleys. The city's constant hum compresses, echoing oddly, footsteps amplified, voices bouncing back in fragments. A laugh from somewhere ahead sounds too loud, then too far away. Water drips steadily, counting time without caring what hour it is. You pass doorways that look less like entrances and more like suggestions. Some lead to rooms barely fit for storage, let alone living. Others open directly into darkness that smells occupied. A face appears briefly, then disappears again, having confirmed whatever it needed to confirm. Waste flows where it finds room. Channels cut into the ground guide it loosely, though not reliably. When it rains, the alleys fill quickly, transforming into shallow rivers that carry everything downhill. People talk about this the way they talk about weather. Inconvenient, expected, occasionally dangerous. There is humor here too, sharp and unsentimental. Someone once painted a sign warning of deep water during floods, positioned so low it disappears the moment it becomes relevant. Someone else jokes that the alleys are the only honest part of the city, because nothing pretends to be better than it is. The laughter that follows is brief but genuine. You smell illness before you see it, a sour note under everything else, clinging to certain doorways longer than others. When disease moves through the neighborhood, it travels these alleys first, carried by water, by contact, by the simple fact that everything passes through here eventually. No one is surprised when it happens. Surprise would suggest expectation. You quicken your pace, not out of fear so much as instinct. The alleys do not invite lingering. They are transitional spaces, meant to be crossed, not occupied. Even those who live here treat them as something to endure between destinations. At the far end, the alley opens back onto a street, wider, brighter, marginally cleaner. The transition feels abrupt, like stepping out of a confession into polite conversation. You pause for a moment, checking your boots, adjusting your coat, making sure nothing obvious followed you out. But something always does. The alleys give the city a place to put what it cannot manage, and once you have walked through them, you understand that nothing truly stays contained. It seeps, it spreads, it waits for rain. You step back onto the street, knowing the alleys remain behind you, busy collecting, patient as ever, doing the work no one else wants to acknowledge. You start to notice that the city does not hide what it produces. It carries it openly, guiding it along shallow channels cut into streets and gutters, like an afterthought that became permanent. Waste moves where gravity allows, following paths worn smooth by repetition. There is no mystery to it. You see where it comes from and where it goes, even if you would rather not think about either for too long. The smell arrives before the sight, a layered familiarity that settles into your nose and stays there. At first it was sharp enough to demand attention. Now it registers the way background noise does, present but unremarkable. You know something has gone wrong when you notice it again, when it spikes suddenly, reminding you that your senses have been filtering more than you realized. The channels run along the sides of streets, sometimes down the middle, carrying a slow mixture of household waste, runoff, and whatever else the day contributed. Rain swells them, pushing everything along with renewed purpose. Dry spells thicken them into something sluggish and stubborn. Either way, they remain, doing their work without apology. People step over them casually, lifting hems, adjusting strides. Children leap across them for fun, daring each other to land closer to the edge. Adults do it out of habit, eyes flicking down just long enough to calculate distance. A misstep is unpleasant, but rarely surprising. Everyone has done it once. Most have done it more than once. The city treats these open channels as infrastructure, even if no one uses that word. They are as much a part of the landscape as brick and smoke. Repairs happen only when flow is interrupted, when waste backs up into places it is not supposed to linger. Otherwise, the system is considered functional. You watch as shopkeepers pour unwanted liquids directly into the channels, careful not to splash themselves. Someone empties a chamber pot with a practiced motion, turning away at the last second. No one comments. Privacy here is a flexible concept. Efficiency matters more. There is humor in how openly everyone acknowledges the situation without discussing it. Someone jokes that the city is honest about what it is. Another says, "At least you always know which way the street slopes." These remarks earn brief smiles, then dissolve back into routine. Laughter does not linger where the smell does not. The channels reflect light in dull streaks, broken by floating debris that tells small stories. A scrap of cloth, a peel, ash from a hearth. Each item once belonged somewhere else, served a purpose, then joined the current. You wonder briefly, how many households contribute to this flow? How many lives intersect here without ever meeting? Illness travels these paths easily. Everyone knows this. It is discussed in practical terms, like weather patterns. When sickness spreads, people talk about which streets flood first, which channels overflow. Avoidance strategies are shared quietly. Knowledge passes faster than official warnings. You realize that the familiarity of the smell is its own danger. When something becomes normal, it stops raising alarms. People notice change, not constancy. The city relies on this, intentionally or not. The waste is visible enough to be managed, invisible enough to be endured. As you walk, you adjust without thinking. You breathe through your mouth when necessary. You time your steps. You stop noticing the slick sheen along the stones unless it changes texture. The body adapts because it must. Discomfort becomes background. At night, the channels sound different. Water moves more audibly, unchallenged by traffic. The smell deepens in cooler air. Lamps reflect off the surface in long, wavering lines that make everything look slightly unreal. You step carefully, guided by memory as much as sight. Despite everything, life continues around these open sewers without hesitation. Conversations happen inches away. Children play beside them. Food is carried past them. The city does not pause for cleanliness. It prioritizes movement. Eventually, you realize that the open channels are not a failure of planning so much as a reflection of priorities. They exist because something else mattered more. Speed, growth, profit. The waste was simply expected to find its own way. You walk on, barely aware of the smell anymore, stepping over what the city cannot contain and carries anyway, knowing that familiarity is not the same as safety, but it will have to do. You come to recognize illness the way you recognize a neighbor's footsteps on the stairs. It announces itself without introductions, slipping into rooms quietly, settling into corners, making itself comfortable before anyone thinks to ask how long it plans to stay. No one names it at first. Naming things gives them shape and weight, and sometimes it feels safer to let sickness remain a vague presence, like bad weather passing through. It starts with small signs. Someone stays in bed a little longer than usual. A cough deepens, loses its humor. A child's skin feels too warm under your hand, the heat steady and insistent. People comment lightly at first, saying it is just a chill, just tiredness, just something going around. They say this because they have said it before, and sometimes it has even been true. Fevers arrive quietly, without drama. They do not kick down doors or demand attention. They slip in during the night, turning sleep restless, dreams sharp and uncomfortable. By morning, the body feels heavier, slower, like it is moving through water. Work becomes harder, thinking becomes foggy. Still, many go in anyway, because absence has its own consequences. The disease spreads efficiently, helped along by close rooms, shared cups, the simple necessity of breathing the same air. It does not require permission. It does not respect effort. It moves through households the way smoke does, finding every gap, every weakness. You watch it pass from one person to another, sometimes pausing, sometimes accelerating, unpredictable in its preferences. There is no panic, only adjustment. Someone takes over a task. Someone brings water, soup if it can be spared. Windows are opened when possible, though the air outside offers its own risks. Advice circulates freely. Remedies pass down with confidence that may or may not be earned. Boiled water, warm cloths. Rest, if rest can be arranged. Doctors exist, technically. They are discussed in the same tone as miracles. Expensive, distant, uncertain. Most illnesses are treated at home with whatever knowledge is available. People know which symptoms to fear and which to endure. They learn this not from books but from experience, from watching who recovers and who does not. Children are particularly vulnerable, which everyone knows and no one can fully address. They burn hot with fever, small bodies struggling against something too large to understand. Adults sit with them through the night, counting breaths, wiping foreheads, bargaining silently with anything that might be listening. Morning comes regardless of outcome. When illness takes someone away, it does not pause to explain itself. One day, a voice is missing from the room. One place at the table stays empty. People speak of it briefly, then less and less. Not out of cruelty but necessity. Life does not allow long interruptions. Grief fits itself into the schedule where it can. There is a strange intimacy in living this close to disease. It becomes part of the social fabric, something you account for without fully acknowledging. You know which houses are struggling, by the way. Doors stay closed longer than usual. You recognize recovery by the sound of movement returning, tentative at first, then stronger. Humor survives here too, though it is thin. Someone jokes that the fever took one look at them and decided it had better places to be. Someone else says they have already survived worse and plan to continue out of spite. These remarks earn quiet smiles. Laughter, even brief, feels like a small victory. You learn not to ask why some people recover and others do not. That question leads nowhere useful. Instead, you focus on what can be done in the moment. Water brought, sheets changed, work covered. This is how care functions when resources are limited. Illness leaves without apology when it chooses to leave. One morning the fever breaks. The cough loosens. Strength returns slowly, unevenly. The person sits up, then stands, then re-enters the rhythm of the city like they were only briefly absent. No ceremony marks the transition. Survival does not require acknowledgement. You live with the knowledge that sickness is always nearby, waiting for the right conditions. You do not fear it constantly. Fear would be exhausting. Instead, you accept its presence the way you accept smoke in the air. It is not welcome. It is simply expected. You feel the shift before anyone says the word. It starts with whispers moving faster than usual, names repeated in low voices, doors staying shut longer than they should. Someone mentions stomach pains. Someone else mentions water that tastes wrong, though it always tastes wrong. By the time the term reaches you, it feels less like news and more like confirmation. Cholera season has arrived. The city tightens around it instinctively. People stop lingering at pumps, filling containers quickly and leaving without conversation. Buckets are carried more carefully, as if respect might make a difference. You notice how often hands are washed now, even though the water itself is suspect. It is a strange choreography, this sudden attention to cleanliness in a place built without it. The sickness moves fast and without drama. No coughing build-up, no long warning. It arrives with violence. Bodies empty themselves until there is nothing left to give. Strength vanishes in hours. Skin changes color in ways you do not like to think about. Those who have seen it before do not need descriptions. Those who have not learn quickly. Doctors appear, some confident, some furious. They argue in doorways and over beds, debating causes like it matters to the outcome. One insists it is the air, poisoned by filth and rot. Another says it comes from within, from weakness, from moral failure, from bad habits that have finally caught up. Someone mentions the water and is waved off impatiently. Everyone drinks water. It cannot be the problem. That would be inconvenient. Families pray because prayer is something you can do without permission. Words are whispered over beds, bargains offered quietly to whatever might be listening. Candles burn low in rooms already short on air. Mothers sit through the night counting breaths. Fathers pace, helpless and angry. Children watch everything and ask fewer questions than usual. The water remains unchanged. It flows through the streets in open channels. It fills buckets at the same pumps. It smells the same, looks the same, carries the same invisible threats. You cannot see the danger, which makes it worse. If it were visible, you could step around it. Instead, it lives in the most basic act of survival. Drink, and you risk sickness. Do not drink, and you risk something slower, but just as final. People try alternatives. Boiling water when fuel allows, mixing it with spirits, convincing themselves that burn means safety, walking farther to different pumps, as if distance alone might help. Advice spreads faster than the illness, most of it contradictory. Do this. Do not do that. Trust this source. Avoid that one. The certainty with which each suggestion is delivered does not match the evidence behind it. There is panic, but it is contained, compressed into tight movements and sharp decisions. No one runs screaming through the streets. There is work to be done, even now, especially now. Mills do not close for sickness. Rent does not pause. The city continues to demand participation, even as bodies fail. You hear carts at night more often now. Quiet ones, covered ones. They move through streets without ceremony, collecting what the illness leaves behind. Neighbors look away, not out of indifference but necessity. If you look too closely, you start counting possibilities. Humor becomes brittle during cholera season, but it does not disappear. Someone says at least the illness saves on funeral expenses by working quickly. Someone else replies that speed has never been a kindness. The laughter that follows is short and sharp, then gone. Doctors continue arguing. Committees form. Pamphlets appear with instructions that assume resources no one has. Clean water is recommended to people who have never known what that means. Clean living is suggested by men who do not live here. The disconnect is almost impressive. You watch households empty and refill. A bed vacated one day is occupied again the next, not always by the same person. Life rearranges itself with ruthless efficiency. Grief is real, but it is managed, folded into routine because there is no alternative. Eventually, the spike slows. Not because the problem is solved, but because it has taken what it can for now. The city exhales cautiously. People return to pumps with less hesitation. Conversations resume. Doctors claim partial victories. The water remains exactly as it was. You know it will happen again. Everyone does. Cholera season does not end. It simply waits. You learn quickly that death here is handled the way everything else is, with organization and very little ceremony. It arrives. It is acknowledged. And then it is filed into the narrow space allowed for it before the day continues. There is no confusion about the process. Everyone knows what comes next, because everyone has seen it often enough. When someone dies, the room grows quiet for a moment, not in shock but in recognition. A body is washed if there is water to spare. Eyes are closed, hands are folded or not, depending on time and inclination. Someone fetches the necessary papers, because absence must be documented properly. Without documentation, death becomes inconvenient. Funerals are brief affairs, scheduled tightly between shifts and obligations. People gather because they should, not because they can afford the time. Words are spoken quickly, prayers shortened, silence is trimmed down to what feels acceptable. There is comfort in familiarity. The rituals do not surprise anyone. They do not need to. You notice how efficiently grief is contained. Faces remain composed in public, voices steady. Tears are reserved for later, for corners, for nights when there is finally nothing else demanding attention. Crying openly would invite questions, and questions take time. Time is not generous. The procession moves through streets that do not pause to notice it. Carts rattle past. Children run ahead and are gently pulled back. Someone tips their hat briefly, then keeps walking. Death does not stop traffic here. It fits around it. Burials happen quickly. Space is limited, and the ground is already crowded. Markers are simple, if they exist at all. Names blur together over time, worn down by weather and soot. You realize that remembering here is often an internal act, carried quietly rather than displayed. Afterward, people return to work, sometimes immediately. Sometimes the next morning, the bell does not wait. Rent does not adjust. Hunger does not soften out of respect. Life resumes because it has to, and because pausing too long would create new problems to manage. There is a strange professionalism to it all. Loss is processed, not denied, but streamlined. Families redistribute responsibilities with little discussion. Someone takes over a shift. Someone else watches the children. The system absorbs the absence the way the factory absorbs injury, closing ranks, maintaining output. You see how this shapes people. They become careful with attachment, not distant, but realistic. Love is expressed through practicality. Food saved, blankets shared, work covered. These gestures carry more weight than speeches ever could. Humor survives even here, though it arrives cautiously. Someone mutters that at least the deceased no longer has to deal with the water. Someone else replies that escaping the city entirely is impressive. The smiles that follow are thin but sincere. Laughter does not diminish grief. It makes it portable. You notice that no one asks for meaning, questions about why feel irrelevant when outcomes are so consistent. People focus instead on what remains, who is still here, what still needs doing, how to get through the week with one less set of hands. Children absorb this atmosphere without commentary. They attend funerals quietly, stand when told, sit when told, and return to play afterward with surprising speed. It is not that they do not care. It is that they have learned early that sadness does not cancel routine. At night, grief finally stretches out. It takes up more space when it is alone. People lie awake replaying conversations, gestures, last moments. These thoughts are kept private because sharing them would require energy and vulnerability that the day does not allow. Morning comes anyway. You understand that this efficiency is not coldness. It is adaptation. When death is frequent, it must be integrated rather than treated as an exception. Otherwise, nothing would function. The city would stall under the weight of its own losses. Still, there are moments when the system falters. A chair left empty too long. A voice you expect to hear that never does. These small disruptions carry more emotional force than the formal rituals ever could. They arrive unexpectedly and linger without permission. You attend another brief funeral, then another. You return to work afterward with everyone else, hands moving automatically, mind elsewhere for a while. The city hums on around you, efficient and unyielding. Death has been processed. Life resumes. You begin to notice the signs before you meet the people. A hand-painted notice nailed to a post, a doorway propped open longer than usual, a soup pot steaming somewhere it normally would not. Charity announces itself quietly here, careful not to promise too much. You encounter the reformers in clusters, earnest faces framed by cleaner coats, voices pitched carefully between compassion and instruction. They speak about improvement, about uplift, about saving souls and bodies in the same sentence, as if the two are easily separated. Their intentions feel genuine. Their confidence feels practiced. They have come with plans, pamphlets, and rules. Missions offer bread, sometimes soup, sometimes a bed for the night if the right questions are answered correctly. You line up with others, shoulders tight, eyes forward, learning quickly what is expected. Gratitude must be visible but not excessive. Humility must be convincing. Stories must be brief. Too much detail sounds like complaint. Too little sounds suspicious. Aid exists, undeniably. You feel it in the warmth of the food, the relief of sitting indoors without paying for the privilege. For a moment, the arithmetic loosens its grip. Hunger steps back just far enough to be negotiable. You do not pretend this is nothing. It matters. It just does not last. There are conditions, some spoken, some not. Attendance at a sermon, agreement with a moral framework that explains your circumstances in ways that are not always flattering, promises to change habits without any clear explanation of how change is supposed to happen when the environment remains exactly the same. The help comes wrapped in expectation, neat and unavoidable. You listen politely. Everyone does. Arguing would be pointless, and besides, arguing costs access. You nod at the right moments. You bow your head when asked. You accept the bread with both hands. You do not mention that prayer does not fix damp walls or clean water. You do not mention the mill. The reformers move through neighborhoods like visitors with maps that do not quite match the terrain. They point out problems everyone already knows intimately. They suggest solutions that assume resources no one here possesses. Still, they return week after week, because leaving would feel like failure, and staying feels like purpose. You see how people learn to navigate this system with the same skill they apply everywhere else. Someone becomes very good at saying the right things. Someone else avoids the missions entirely, unwilling to trade dignity for dinner. Someone attends regularly, not for the food, but for the warmth and the sense of being briefly seen. There is humor in this too, dry and sharp. Someone jokes that the soup tastes holier every week. Someone else says they prefer the sermons short and the bread thick. These comments circulate quietly, never loud enough to reach the front of the room. Gratitude is public. Commentary is private. The limits of charity reveal themselves quickly. Supplies run out. Beds fill. Donations fluctuate. The need does not. When the pot empties, the line disperses without drama. People understand scarcity. They live inside it. Disappointment is folded away and carried elsewhere. You notice how reformers speak often of deserving and undeserving without quite realizing it. The categories shift subtly depending on behavior, posture, tone. Help becomes a test rather than a given. Those who pass receive a little more time, a little more patience. Those who fail are advised to try again tomorrow, preferably improved. Despite everything, some good comes of it. A child eats who might not have. A fever is noticed early. A family gets through a week that would otherwise have broken them. These moments are real and meaningful. They are just not transformative. You watch the reformers leave at the end of the day, their work done for now. They walk back toward cleaner streets, already planning their next visit, their next appeal for funds. You remain where you are, carrying the benefits and the boundaries with you. Charity here feels like a patch applied carefully to a structure that continues to crack underneath. It slows collapse. It does not stop it. No one involved seems surprised by this. As you walk away with a full stomach and a head full of instructions, you understand that help can be sincere and insufficient at the same time. And here, it usually is. You begin to notice that much of the city is held together quietly, without announcement, by women whose work does not clock out. They move through rooms and streets with practiced efficiency, carrying responsibilities that stretch far beyond what anyone would reasonably expect from a single body. Mothers, daughters, widows, sisters, all performing a kind of continuous labor that has no bell to signal its end. You see it first in the mornings. A woman rises before everyone else, coaxing warmth from a stubborn fire, dividing food into portions that must satisfy both hunger and arithmetic. She measures without tools, eyeballing amounts with the confidence of long experience. Too much here means too little later. Too little now means complaints she does not have time to hear. She chooses the version of discomfort that keeps the day moving. Children orbit her constantly. Shirts are mended while lessons are recited. Hair is brushed while instructions are given. A cough is assessed, a bruise dismissed, a fever noted and stored away mentally for later worry. She does not pause to admire this efficiency. There is no audience for it. It simply happens. When work calls others away, she stays behind and works differently. Floors are scrubbed, water is hauled, laundry is washed in cold conditions that punish the hands. Every task feeds into another. Clean clothes reduce illness. Clean floors reduce pests. Fewer pests mean fewer problems that require attention she cannot spare. This is strategy disguised as routine. Widows carry a particular weight, one that shifts conversations the moment they enter a room. Some receive quiet help, food appearing without explanation, chores taken over wordlessly. Others are left to manage alone, depending on reputation, luck, and the strength of their remaining network. You see how quickly a woman can become invisible once her status changes, how survival suddenly depends on both resilience and being remembered. Daughters grow into this work early. They learn by watching, absorbing patterns without formal instruction. A girl who can manage a household before she is fully grown is praised quietly, sometimes pitied, sometimes admired. She moves with seriousness beyond her years, already fluent in sacrifice. Childhood shortens around her without ceremony. Their labor never ends because it cannot. There is always something to be done, something to prevent, something to anticipate. Even rest is active, taken lightly, one ear open, body ready to respond. Sleep comes in fragments, easily interrupted. Exhaustion is familiar but not negotiable. You notice how rarely this work is counted. Wages are discussed loudly. Output is measured. Productivity is tracked. But the work that keeps bodies fed, clothed, and functional slips through every ledger. It is assumed, not acknowledged. When it fails, everyone notices. When it succeeds, no one comments. There is humor here too, sharp and sustaining. Women joke about being paid in gratitude and receiving neither. They laugh about the miracle of making a meal from almost nothing. These jokes travel quickly, shared between tasks, fueling camaraderie that functions like a second spine. In moments of crisis, it is often women who respond first. A neighbor falls ill, and someone appears with water and advice. A child wanders off, and someone notices before panic sets in. Information moves through these networks faster than any official channel. Warnings are passed quietly. Solutions are improvised. You watch a woman calculate expenses with coins spread thin on a table, her expression calm, focused. She does the math, adjusts, and does it again, finding ways to stretch what refuses to stretch. When she looks up, she smiles briefly, already shifting to the next task. There is no time to dwell on the impossibility of it all. Their strength is not loud. It does not announce itself. It is visible only if you are paying attention, if you notice who fills gaps and smooths disruptions and keeps going long after anyone would expect them to stop. Without these women, the city would unravel quickly. The mills might still run, the streets might still fill, but the connective tissue would fail. Hunger would sharpen, illness would spread faster, children would slip through cracks too wide to ignore. They do not ask for recognition. They ask for enough, and they rarely get it. You stand in a wash space that feels like a continuation of the factory rather than a break from it. Steam hangs low and constant, blurring faces and softening edges, turning the room into something half real and half imagined. The air is thick with heat and soap and damp fabric, a smell that suggests effort rather than cleanliness. Work follows work here, seamlessly, without apology. Water sloshes in large tubs, gray almost immediately no matter how clear it starts. Arms plunge in and out rhythmically, scrubbing, wringing, lifting, repeating. The sound is relentless. Cloth slapped against stone, water poured and repoured, voices calling out warnings about boiling pots and slippery floors. There is no quiet satisfaction here, only momentum. You watch people arrive already tired, shoulders tight from hours of labor elsewhere, faces set in expressions of resigned determination. No one lingers at the doorway wondering whether to begin. The choice was made long before they arrived. Clean clothes are not optional. They are defensive, against illness, against judgment, against the slow accumulation of neglect that marks you visibly in this city. The steam settles into your hair and clothes almost immediately, erasing any sense of dryness you brought with you. Hands redden quickly, skin softening under constant exposure to heat and soap. Knuckles crack, nails split. Someone laughs bitterly that at least the dirt comes off easier when the skin goes with it. The joke lands because everyone knows it is not entirely a joke. Children hover at the edges, assigned smaller tasks, rinsing, carrying, watching bundles while someone steps away briefly. They learn early that cleanliness is earned, not given, that it costs time, strength, and a tolerance for discomfort. A child complains once and is handed a heavier load, not out of cruelty, but instruction. Clean clothes feel like a moral achievement here, not because anyone believes dirtiness is a failure of character, but because cleanliness requires such sustained effort. When something costs this much, it takes on meaning. A freshly washed shirt is proof that someone had the energy to fight entropy for a few hours and win temporarily. You notice how people assess each other quietly, not with cruelty, but awareness. Who managed to wash this week? Who did not? Who smells faintly of soap and who carries the sourness of damp fabric that never fully dried? These observations are not judgments so much as data, information folded into how people understand each other's circumstances. The work is communal but not cooperative in the way you might expect. Everyone focuses on their own pile, their own problem. Help is offered sparingly and specifically. A grip adjusted, a warning shouted, a pot moved before it spills. There is no room for inefficiency disguised as kindness. Steam fogs the windows completely, cutting the room off from the outside world. For a while, nothing exists beyond water, fabric, and aching arms. The repetition becomes hypnotic. Scrub, rinse, wring, repeat. Thoughts quiet not because things are peaceful, but because they are occupied. There is humor here too, rough and immediate. Someone complains that the clothes will be dirty again before they are dry. Someone else replies that at least the dirt will be fresh. Laughter bursts out unexpectedly, sharp and loud, then fades back into the sound of water. These moments feel important, like pressure being released just enough to keep everything from breaking. When clothes are finally hung, they drip steadily, forming small rivers along the floor. Lines sag under the weight, fabric heavy with water and effort. Drying is uncertain. Dampness lingers, especially in this city, but clean enough is still a victory. You accept imperfection readily when perfection was never on offer. As people gather their bundles to leave, they look marginally lighter, not rested, but accomplished. They carry the weight of wet clothes back into streets that will do their best to undo the work. Smoke will settle, dust will cling, life will happen. Still, for a moment, something has been pushed back. You step out of the steam knowing you will be back, because survival here is not just about enduring work, but about preparing to endure it again, clean enough to pass, strong enough to continue. You catch it by accident, the sound slipping through the noise like it does not belong there. Laughter, sharp and unguarded, bouncing off brick and stone before the city can flatten it. You turn a corner and see children clustered in a scrap of open space that barely qualifies as a yard, their faces lit with something fleeting and bright. Play happens here in stolen minutes, between shifts, between errands, between being needed. A game forms quickly with whatever is available. A rag ball kicked across uneven ground, a stick turned into a sword, then a baton, then something imaginary that does not require explanation. Rules are invented on the spot and discarded just as fast. The point is not fairness. The point is movement. Their laughter comes in bursts, loud and reckless, as if they know it might be confiscated at any moment. Someone dares someone else to jump a puddle that smells faintly wrong. A girl wins, lands cleanly, throws her arms up in triumph. Applause erupts, exaggerated and joyful, then stops abruptly when a voice calls a name from a doorway. One child freezes mid-step, then shrugs and keeps playing anyway, pushing the limit just a little. Another checks the street instinctively, already calculating how much time is left. Play here is not timeless. It is measured. You notice how quickly they adapt. A game dissolves the moment danger approaches, laughter snapping off like a switch. A cart rolls past and the children scatter without panic, pressing themselves against walls, then reassembling once it clears. Someone trips and scrapes a knee, winces, then laughs it off because crying would slow everything down. Their clothes are worn, patched, mismatched, but when they move, none of that matters. Bodies become light briefly, agile in ways adults no longer are. They run hard and stop suddenly, breathing fast, grinning at nothing in particular. Sweat mixes with grime, and no one cares. There is humor here that feels different from the factory jokes. It is louder, sillier, less careful. Someone pretends to be a foreman and orders everyone to work harder, prompting exaggerated groans and mock rebellion. The parody lasts seconds before reality threatens to intrude. But those seconds matter. You see how play teaches them things without intending to. Balance, negotiation, how to fall without injury, how to watch everything at once. They argue briefly over rules, then compromise quickly because time is short and grudges are inefficient. They have already learned what adults take years to accept. A woman leans out of a window and calls down, her voice firm but not angry. A child groans dramatically, earning laughter from the others, then bolts toward the building, disappearing inside. The game adjusts without ceremony, roles reassigned, momentum preserved. You realize that these moments are not planned. They happen when exhaustion loosens its grip just enough, when schedules align briefly, when supervision lapses for a heartbeat. Play here is opportunistic. It takes advantage of any gap it finds. The city does not encourage this. It tolerates it until it becomes inconvenient. A shout from down the street sends the group scattering again. Someone needs fetching. Someone else is late. Someone has been given an errand that cannot wait. Within moments, the space empties. The laughter fades. The puddle remains. The stick drops to the ground, abandoned mid-story. The yard returns to being just another neglected corner of the city. You stand there for a second, longer than necessary, holding on to the echo. The silence that follows feels heavier than before, like something was briefly lifted and then set down again with extra weight. Later, you see the same children moving through the streets with practiced seriousness, carrying loads, watching younger siblings, slipping back into roles that fit too tightly. If you did not know better, you might not believe they were laughing only an hour ago. Play does not disappear entirely. It retreats. It waits for the next opening. It survives on scraps, just like everything else here. And when it appears, however briefly, it reminds you that the city has not taken everything yet. Night does not bring stillness so much as a change in rhythm. Darkness settles over the slums like a heavy blanket. But beneath it, the city keeps moving, shifting, breathing. Lamps glow weakly through soot-smeared glass, throwing uneven light onto brick and mud and faces that look half-finished in shadow. You realize quickly that night here is not an absence of activity. It is a different arrangement of it. Rooms fill beyond capacity. Bodies sort themselves into whatever space remains, practiced and efficient. Someone claims the bed first because they need to rise earliest. Someone else takes the floor without complaint, wrapping themselves in coats that smell faintly of smoke and damp wool. Children are slotted between adults like pieces in a puzzle, small frames tucked where warmth gathers naturally. Privacy dissolves entirely. Sleep is a communal act. The air grows thicker as doors close and lamps dim. Breath accumulates. Coughs echo softly, answered from other corners of the room like signals exchanged in the dark. Someone snores almost immediately, deep and unapologetic. Someone else lies awake, staring at nothing, counting sounds instead of sheep. Outside, footsteps pass, voices drift, a cart rattles by, reminding you that the world has not paused just because you have. Sleep comes lightly, if it comes at all. You drift in and out, pulled awake by movement, by noise, by the simple awareness of other bodies shifting beside you. An elbow presses into your side. A child mutters in their sleep. Someone turns over with a sigh that sounds like a full conversation. You adjust without thinking, making room, yielding space, protecting what little comfort you have found. Night smells different. Less smoke, more dampness. The scent of waste rises as the air cools, creeping in through cracks and under doors. You breathe shallowly without realizing it, instinctively limiting how much of the night you take in. The floor feels colder now, moisture seeping up through stone and earth. Anyone sleeping there curls tighter, chasing warmth inward. There is movement outside even in the deepest hours. Someone heads to a late shift. Someone returns from one. A door opens quietly, then closes again. Somewhere nearby, an argument flares briefly, sharp voices cutting through the dark before being swallowed by it. No one intervenes. Night disputes burn themselves out quickly or carry on until morning decides what to do with them. You become aware of how vulnerable sleep is here. It is not a full retreat. It is a partial surrender, taken cautiously. One ear remains open. One part of the mind stays alert, ready to wake if something changes. True rest feels indulgent, almost irresponsible. Children adapt fastest. They fall asleep mid-sentence, bodies giving in when they finally can. Their breathing evens out quickly, untroubled by thoughts of tomorrow. For a while, adults take longer. Minds replay the day, the arithmetic, the near misses. Sleep, when it arrives, is thin and easily torn. There is humor even here, murmured before lamps are extinguished. Someone complains about being used as a pillow. Someone else replies that it is better than the floor. A quiet laugh ripples through the room, then fades as exhaustion reasserts itself. These small exchanges feel important, like reminders that the room holds people, not just bodies. Dreams, when they come, are vivid and strange. Machines intrude. Bells ring without stopping. Streets twist endlessly. You wake abruptly, heart racing, then slowly realize where you are, who is beside you, what time it might be. The relief is temporary but real. Outside, rain begins softly, tapping against roofs and pooling in familiar places. The sound is almost soothing until you remember what it will bring by morning. Water moves through the city whether anyone wants it to or not. You listen to it for a while, letting it mask other noises, then drift again. Night passes unevenly. Hours stretch and compress. Eventually, the darkness thins, not because the city rests, but because it is preparing to begin again. Someone stirs. Someone sits up. Someone coughs more deliberately now. You realize that night here is not for restoration. It is for survival between days. You live with fire the way others live with weather. It is always nearby, always possible, never fully discussed. You smell it constantly in coal smoke and lamp oil, in cooking fires and factory furnaces, in the faint scorch that clings to wood that has been heated too often. Flame is useful, necessary, and quietly terrifying. Buildings here are not designed to forgive mistakes. Timber frames dry out and age until they feel eager to burn. Floors are thin, walls are shared. One careless knock, one lamp tipped too far, one spark carried on the wrong draft, and the danger spreads faster than anyone can shout about it. You know this without being told. Everyone does. You notice how people place lamps carefully, always in the same spots, always away from fabric when possible. You see how cooking fires are watched even when exhaustion pulls attention elsewhere. Someone stays awake longer than they should, just to make sure embers die properly. These are not acts of paranoia. They are habits learned from stories no one enjoys repeating. Escape plans exist, but they are never spoken aloud. They live in muscle memory instead. You know which window sticks and which opens easily. You know which door must never be blocked, even temporarily. You know where children are likely to sleep and who will grab whom if shouting begins. This knowledge settles into you quietly, as practical as knowing where the water bucket is kept. Buckets matter. They sit in corners, half full, heavy, and inconvenient. They are tripped over, cursed at, refilled reluctantly. No one suggests removing them. In a fire, water becomes more valuable than furniture, and sometimes more valuable than time. People practice without practicing, lifting buckets occasionally just to remind themselves what they feel like. At night, the fear sharpens. Darkness hides smoke until it is too late. Sleep dulls reactions. Lamps burn longer. You lie awake listening for unfamiliar sounds. A crackle that does not belong. Shouting that does not follow the usual patterns. The smell of burning wood where none should be. You learn to distinguish between ordinary smoke and the kind that demands action. When a fire does start nearby, the city responds with alarming speed. Shouts ripple through streets. Doors fly open. People spill out, carrying whatever they can grab in seconds. Someone bangs on walls. Someone else runs ahead to warn the next building. There is no waiting for confirmation. Delay costs lives. You have seen the aftermath. A blackened shell where a row of houses stood, twisted iron, brick walls exposed like broken teeth. People standing in silence, staring at the absence, counting losses without speaking. Fires do not negotiate. They take what they can reach and move on, leaving the city to sort out what remains. Humor, somehow, survives even this. Someone jokes grimly that at least the rats will need to find new homes. Someone else replies that the fire did what the landlord never would, cleared out the damp. These comments land unevenly, but they land. Laughter here is not about levity, it is about breathing. Children understand the danger instinctively. They are taught what to do without formal lessons. Follow the noise, stay low, do not go back for toys. They repeat these instructions in games, half joking, half serious. Play becomes rehearsal. Fear turns into routine. Factories burn too, sometimes spectacularly. When that happens, the smoke rises thick and dark, visible for miles. Work stops, briefly. Crowds gather at a safe distance, watching a livelihood go up in flames. There is shock, yes, but also calculation. What does this mean for wages, for tomorrow, for rent? Even disaster is processed through necessity. You realize that fire is the one thing that can erase the city faster than disease. It does not wait for weakness. It does not require proximity. It leaps. It spreads. It consumes without preference. The knowledge sits heavy, a constant undercurrent beneath daily life. And yet, flames are lit every night. Lamps are trimmed. Fires are stoked. The risk is accepted because the alternative is darkness, cold, hunger. Safety here is not about elimination. It is about management. You lie down knowing exactly how you would move if smoke filled the room. Which child you would lift first. Which door you would try. Which window you would break if you had to. These plans do not frighten you anymore. They comfort you. Because in a city this crowded, survival often depends not on avoiding disaster, but on being ready when it arrives. Winter does not arrive suddenly. It infiltrates. One morning you wake and realize the cold has stopped leaving. It sits in the walls, in the floor, in the air itself, patient and unmoved by daylight. Breath fogs inside rooms now, pale clouds forming with every word, every sigh. You watch your own exhalation like a stranger, proof that warmth is leaking out of you faster than it can be replaced. Coal becomes the center of every conversation without ever being mentioned directly. You feel its absence more than its presence. A small fire burns low and carefully, fed like a fragile animal that might die if you are careless or too generous. Someone decides when to add a lump, weighing the future against the present with a seriousness usually reserved for prayer. The fire is never allowed to roar. Roaring means waste. You wear everything you own. Layers blur together. Wool scratches skin already irritated by damp and smoke. Coats are slept in, sat in, argued over. Someone wraps a scarf around their head indoors and no one comments, because commenting would acknowledge how cold it truly is. Hands ache constantly. Fingers stiffen. Small tasks take longer because joints do not want to cooperate. Damp becomes an enemy you cannot see but always feel. Walls sweat. Floors remain slick and cold. Blankets never quite dry. Shoes squelch softly even days after rain. The cold here is not crisp or clean. It is heavy, wet, and persistent, like the city itself has decided to press closer. Children suffer quietly at first. They grow still, conserving energy, huddling together instinctively. Their cheeks redden, then pale. Coughs deepen. Adults watch closely, measuring fevers with hands and worry. Extra coal is burned for illness, even when it means colder nights later. No one says this aloud. It is understood. Humor adapts to the season. Someone jokes that at least the cold keeps the smell down. Someone else replies that it only freezes it in place for spring. Laughter comes out in short bursts, visible in the air, then disappears. Jokes are told quickly, because standing still is unbearable. Work does not slow. Mills remain warm enough to function, which makes the transition brutal. You leave a freezing room, walk through icy streets, then step into damp heat thick with steam and sweat. Bodies struggle to adjust. Colds become constant companions. Hands crack and bleed. The contrast itself feels like punishment. At night, sleep becomes a negotiation with temperature. Too close to the fire and you risk sparks or smoke. Too far and cold creeps in mercilessly. People arrange themselves like furniture around warmth, rotating positions as if cooking slowly on all sides. No one sleeps deeply. The cold keeps you half awake, alert to discomfort. You learn new economies. Candles are extinguished earlier to save fuel. Cooking shifts toward whatever requires the least heat. Water is heated sparingly, just enough to be tolerable. Washing becomes strategic. Cleanliness is postponed, not abandoned, but postponed with careful reasoning. Outside, the city looks harder. Smoke hangs lower. Streets glisten with frozen filth. Horses move carefully, breath steaming, hooves slipping. Accidents increase. Falls are common. Broken bones are treated with resignation. Winter does not create danger. It amplifies what already exists. There is fear of snow, not for beauty, but for what it reveals and what it hides. Snow shows just how uneven the streets are. Snow covers hazards. Snow melts into everything and makes dampness worse. When it does fall, children react first with delight, then are pulled back indoors, joy curtailed by practicality. Coal deliveries become events. Carts arrive and eyes track them openly. Neighbors watch neighbors, counting loads without meaning to. Resentment flares briefly, then fades. Everyone understands that survival is uneven but not personal. Winter teaches this lesson repeatedly. You realize that cold changes time. Days feel longer. Nights stretch. Spring becomes an idea more than a promise. You hold on to small signs. A slightly warmer afternoon. Less fogged breath. A fire that lasts longer than expected. Winter does not break the city. It simply tests how much it can endure while continuing exactly as it is. Change enters the city as a whisper first. It slides along walls and through doorways, carried by people who speak quietly and glance around as if the idea itself might be listening. You hear it at the mill, half drowned by machinery. You hear it in the wash house, passed between women like a secret recipe. You hear it in the gin palace, where even hope needs a drink before it dares to speak. They say men from London are talking. They say Parliament is arguing about hours and ages and inspections. They say someone important has finally noticed that children should not be smaller than the machines they serve. The words feel strange in your mouth. Law, reform, protection. They sound like furniture meant for better houses. You learn quickly to treat these rumors carefully. Too much belief invites disappointment. Too little makes you look foolish if it turns out to be true. So you hover somewhere in the middle, listening without committing, nodding without smiling. Experience has trained you well. Inspectors are mentioned most often. Men who might walk into mills unannounced, notebooks in hand, faces pinched with concern. Some say they will measure air and count fingers and ask questions no one wants to answer honestly. Others say they will be shown clean rooms and polite children and then ushered out quickly with thanks and tea. Both versions feel plausible. At work, the talk changes tone depending on who is nearby. When overseers pass, conversations dissolve instantly. When they leave, speculation rushes back in. Someone swears their cousin in another town saw shorter hours introduced. Someone else says that lasted exactly 3 weeks before prophets spoke louder. Laughter follows, sharp and practiced. You notice how hope behaves here. It does not expand, it contracts, it becomes precise. No one dreams of comfort. They dream of less pain, fewer hours, a child coming home with all their fingers, air that does not burn. These are not grand visions. They are modest adjustments to misery. Reformers appear occasionally, recognizable by their clean boots and concerned expressions. They tour streets with notebooks, stepping carefully around puddles as if disease might leap up uninvited. They ask questions that feel both sincere and naive. How many live here? How many sleep in this room? How old is that child? You answer when asked, choosing words that sound factual rather than desperate. Some bring pamphlets, some bring prayers, a few bring soup, all bring opinions. They debate causes and cures while you think about coal and rent and tomorrow. Their interest feels genuine, but also temporary. You have learned that attention does not always translate into change. There is humor in watching it all. Someone mutters that if reform arrives, it will trip over the same brick everyone else does. Someone else suggests inspectors should try sleeping here before recommending improvements. Laughter moves through the group, low and quick, easing tension without resolving it. Children listen closely, even when pretending not to. They repeat phrases they do not fully understand. Factory Act, schooling, age limits. These words sound like spells. You catch them playing games where someone pretends to be an inspector and declares everyone free for the day. The game never lasts long. Skepticism runs deep. You have seen laws written far away that bend before they reach these streets. You have watched promises evaporate between announcement and enforcement. Still, something about this feels different. Maybe because the talk persists. It does not vanish after a week. It lingers. You hear that newspapers are involved now. Articles with grim descriptions and bold headlines. Drawings of narrow rooms and thin children. The idea that strangers might be reading about your life over breakfast feels absurd and oddly satisfying. Let them choke on it a little. At home, discussions continue by candlelight. Older neighbors remember earlier attempts. Younger ones argue that this time has to be real. Voices rise, then soften. No one wants to be the first to believe fully. No one wants to be the last either. You realize that reform, even rumored, changes behavior. People straighten slightly when speaking. They complain more openly. They imagine futures just enough to make the present feel negotiable. The city does not change yet, but the way people talk about it does. Hope arrives cautiously, wearing plain clothes. It does not promise anything. It simply refuses to leave immediately, and that alone feels like a small revolution. You pause just long enough to notice the imbalance. From inside the city, life feels immediate and exhausting, a daily negotiation with hunger, noise, and time. But when you step back, even slightly, a different picture sharpens. Everything here is moving outward. Cloth, thread, finished goods, profits, reputation. The city feeds something vast and distant, and it does so relentlessly. Cotton arrives from far away, already soaked in suffering you never see. It leaves transformed, spun, and woven by aching hands into wealth that rarely circles back. You watch carts roll toward canals and rail depots, stacked high with the results of endless shifts. Each bale represents hours, shaved off lives, lungs filled with dust, fingers worn raw. The carts do not pause to acknowledge this. They move efficiently, proudly. Manchester is spoken of elsewhere with admiration, a marvel, a triumph of industry. People write about it in newspapers and speeches, praising progress and innovation. You imagine these words being read aloud in clean rooms by people who have never smelled the streets after rain. They speak of growth. You think of crowding. Factories rise like monuments, their chimneys visible from miles away. They signal productivity, power, modernity. They also signal where the smoke will settle, where the ash will fall, where the air will be hardest to breathe. The empire loves these buildings. It counts them. It points to them. It rarely enters the rooms beneath them. You begin to see the pattern everywhere. Food arrives cheaply because wages are low. Cloth sells well because labor is plentiful and desperate. Schedules stretch because bodies are replaceable. The city absorbs the damage, so the system does not have to. This is not a conspiracy. It is a habit. Ships carry Manchester's output across oceans. Somewhere, someone wears a shirt made from these streets and calls it affordable. Somewhere else, an investor smiles at a ledger. The distance between those places and this one feels immeasurable, even though it is bridged by the same thread. You notice how little stays. Money passes through quickly. It touches hands briefly, then moves on. Improvements are discussed, delayed, adjusted. Meanwhile, the machinery hums steadily, indifferent to debates. The empire does not need comfort here. It needs consistency. There is a strange pride mixed into it all. People know their work matters, even if their well-being does not. They understand that the world runs on what they produce. This knowledge offers a thin, stubborn sense of worth. Without Manchester, things would stop. That thought carries weight. Even when pockets are empty, humor survives here too, sharp and knowing. Someone jokes that they are personally responsible for keeping half of Britain clothed. Someone else replies that they should be paid accordingly. Laughter ripples, then fades as reality reasserts itself. Jokes do not raise wages. You see children who will never see the places their labor supports. They know the names of machines better than the names of cities their work supplies. Their world is measured in shifts and streets, not markets and maps. The empire is an abstraction. The mill is not. Reformers sometimes speak of balance, of sharing prosperity more fairly. You wonder what that would look like in practice. Clean air does not travel well. Rest cannot be exported. The benefits of industry are portable. The costs are not. Standing back, you understand that the city is doing exactly what it was built to do. It concentrates effort. It converts lives into output. It sustains a system that praises efficiency above all else. The suffering is not a flaw. It is a byproduct, accepted and managed. And yet, the city continues to breathe, to adapt, to endure. People marry, argue, joke, raise children, and plan futures within this machinery. Life insists on itself, even when used as fuel. Manchester feeds an empire every day. The empire rarely looks back. You stop expecting acknowledgement somewhere along the way, not because you consciously decide to, but because the city trains it out of you. There are no medals for making it through another winter. No applause for keeping children fed on arithmetic that barely works. No ceremony for showing up again after yesterday took everything you had. Survival here is not heroic. It is procedural. You wake, you move, you work. Not because it is noble, but because stopping would unravel too many things at once. Rent does not pause for reflection. Hunger does not respect fatigue. Children still need shoes even when hope feels thin. Life continues forward with the blunt insistence of a machine that has no off switch. You notice how rarely anyone asks how you are doing. The question exists, but it is ornamental, used briefly and answered automatically. Fine, managing, same as always. Real answers would take too long and accomplish too little. Everyone already knows the shape of them anyway. Endurance becomes invisible through repetition. The first time you survive something difficult, it feels like an event. The 10th time, it feels like Tuesday. People around you carry stories that would stop conversations cold elsewhere. But here they are, delivered casually, between tasks, lost fingers, lost children, lost chances. These facts settle into the air like dust and are breathed without comment. There is humor in this, dark and efficient. Someone says they should start charging admission just to watch them keep going. Someone else replies that no one would pay to see what they already expect. Laughter flickers, practical and brief, then work resumes. Even jokes have places to be. You realize that endurance here is communal but lonely. Everyone is surviving together, but each person carries their portion alone. There is no shared victory, only shared continuation. The city does not gather to celebrate another year of making it through. It simply resets and demands another. Faith, when it exists, is quiet and functional. Prayers are short. Gratitude is selective. People ask not for ease, but for enough. Enough strength, enough coal, enough time. Grand miracles would be suspicious. Small mercies are trusted. You see how children learn this early. They do not expect praise for responsibility. They absorb it as baseline behavior. Helping is not framed as kindness. It is framed as necessity. They grow up knowing that effort is expected and rarely remarked upon. Compliments are considered inefficient. Occasionally, someone from outside notices. A reformer, a writer, a visitor with clean hands and startled eyes. They comment on resilience, on spirit, on the strength of the poor. These observations land awkwardly. Strength implies choice. Spirit implies uplift. Neither quite fits. What you are doing is not inspirational. It is required. The city does not clap when a mother stretches a meal. It does not pause when a man works through pain. It does not nod approvingly when a child learns too quickly. These moments pass unmarked, except by those directly involved. Recognition is a luxury item, and yet something persists underneath the fatigue. Not optimism exactly, but stubbornness. A refusal to collapse simply because collapse would be inconvenient for everyone else. You keep going out of habit, out of obligation, out of an instinct older than logic. The city has shaped this instinct carefully. You begin to understand that endurance here is not loud because it cannot afford to be. Loud things attract attention. Attention brings interference. Quiet persistence allows life to continue unadjusted. There is safety in being overlooked. At night, when movement slows and sound softens, you sometimes feel the weight of it all press closer. The effort accumulates. The years stack. There is no finish line in sight, only the next morning assembling itself. You acknowledge the heaviness briefly, then set it aside. Tomorrow will require function, not reflection. No one pins a ribbon on you for this. No one needs to, because in this place, continuing is not celebrated. It is simply how the city remains alive. You leave without ceremony. There is no gate, no moment where the city announces that it has released you. Streets simply widen, smoke thins slightly, and the noise rearranges itself into something less constant. Your feet carry you forward, but part of you hesitates, not out of loyalty, but because the body has learned this geography too well to abandon it cleanly. The air changes first. It stops tasting like coal dust soaked into damp brick. You notice it because your lungs do, pulling deeper than they have in years. As if surprised by the extra space, the absence feels strange, almost suspicious. You half expect the familiar burn to return, like a joke that has gone on so long you forget it is optional. Sound follows. The machines no longer dictate the rhythm of thought. There is quiet here, or something close enough to it that your mind does not know what to do. You catch yourself listening for bells that never ring, for the layered hum that once told you exactly where you were without looking. Silence feels unfinished. You realize quickly that leaving does not mean shedding. The city has lodged itself in habits. You still walk with urgency. You still measure distances in effort, not miles. When you see a group of children, your eyes flick instinctively to their hands, their posture, their alertness. When you pass a narrow doorway, you note how many people could sleep inside. These calculations continue without permission. Smell is the hardest to shake. A hint of smoke anywhere pulls you backward. Damp stone, sour water, oil on metal. These scents arrive uninvited and fully formed, dragging memories with them. You breathe through them, but they cling, as stubborn as the city ever was. There is relief. Yes. Your shoulders lower gradually, muscles releasing tension they have held for years without comment. You notice how much energy that tension required only after it loosens. Rest feels unfamiliar, like a language you once spoke and abandoned. Even now, part of you expects interruption. You think about the people still there, not constantly, but persistently. They surface in moments of quiet. The woman who counted coal carefully, the child who learned routes instead of games, the man who joked about keeping an empire clothed. These figures are not symbols to you. They are specific, detailed, impossible to summarize. Perspective arrives, but it does not simplify. You see more clearly how the city fits into a larger machine, how suffering was organized and distributed efficiently. Understanding does not lessen the weight of it. If anything, it sharpens it. Knowledge does not offer absolution. You notice how easily others move on. Conversations drift elsewhere. Interest fades. The city becomes an idea again, something discussed rather than lived. This does not anger you. It confirms what you already know. Distance is comfortable. Proximity is demanding. You carry Manchester with you in quieter ways, in how you value warmth, in how you waste nothing without noticing, in how you mistrust easy narratives about progress. When someone praises industry without hesitation, you hear what they are not saying. When they admire prosperity, you wonder where it pooled and where it drained away. There is no clean ending to this journey. Leaving does not resolve anything. It simply relocates you. The city continues without you, adapting as it always has, absorbing new bodies, new reforms, new stories. Your absence barely registers, and that too feels appropriate. Sometimes, late at night, you notice the echo, a phantom vibration, like machinery heard through walls that are no longer there. It fades eventually, but not entirely. The city has rewired how you notice the world. You understand now that places do not stay behind. They travel quietly, embedded in breath and memory, shaping how you stand, how you listen, how you understand what survival really costs. You walk on, and the city walks with you.